I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence. Thank you. All right, adoption of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the agenda as presented, posted to board docs.
Second.
Thank you. I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
No, sir.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Moving into presentations, we have the superintendent here with the school report.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the board. Good afternoon from Panther Nation. Second semester at RCPS is off to a great start. Interims for third quarter went out last week already, and celebrations took place at RCES for the 100th and 101st days of school. Students and teachers celebrated by dressing as 100-year-old people on day 100 and as Dalmatians on day 101. The pictures were hilarious and spirited smiles filled the hallways. Winter sports are heading into postseason play. We had a very successful weekend in wrestling and Scholastic Bowl. William Newman placed third in the Region 1B wrestling tournament for the 150 class and will advance to the state tournament on February 17th and 18th. Our Scholastic Bowl team placed second in the Super Regional Tournament Saturday and will advance to the state tournament on February 25th. Our girls varsity basketball team is also looking strong and will likely advance as well. At our CHS, many events and special trips are planned. In fact, our art club students just returned from Florida, where they were able to tour the Ringling College of Art and Design, visit the Ringling Museum of Art, and attend the Disney Festival of the Arts at Epcot, where they were able to enjoy visual, culinary, and performing arts. Our band students will be traveling to Universal Studios to compete next month, and will be bringing back the annual mini golf fundraiser this Saturday, February 11th at RCHS from 1 to 6 p.m. Come out and enjoy the fun and help our band students get to Florida. RCES kicked off its One School, One Book event last week. This initiative promotes literacy and the joy of reading by incorporating fun activities and lessons across the entire school. The whole school community is reading Mr. Popper's Penguins together as part of One School, One Book. Classes also get to compete in fun literacy-related challenges and trivia for fun prizes, and families are encouraged to read together at home as well. Finally, we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at our joint School Board Board of Supervisors budget work session on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, where we can discuss this year's budget development and the variables impacting that development as well. Among one of the major variables is House Bill 1443, which I'm very pleased to say has passed the House without any opposition, not a single nay vote, which is pretty incredible. In fact, just today I saw that it was already referred to the Senate Appropriations Committee, which is a great sign for the money people. So if they had a lot of questions, it would probably go into the Education Committee to look at it a little more. So yesterday, of course, was Budget Sunday in Richmond, where each chamber has submitted its respective budget amendments for review by the other chamber. Bills will cross over and be reviewed by the other chamber for approval or referral to committee work, and we'll continue to track House Bill 1443, which will have a major impact on the development of the fiscal year 24 budget. Thank you so much for your advocacy efforts, which truly are helping this bill progress, and thank you for your continued support.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
As we're entering budget season, I know I asked maybe last month what we should look forward to, and I promise I'll bring all kinds of love and enthusiasm on Valentine's Day when we meet. But I'd just like to know anything we should be aware of in advance of our joint meeting.
So just some major inputs that we're looking at. Both chambers did push up the 5% increase to a 7%. That goes for county, I think, as well. So that's a little bit of an increase in what we'll be looking for revenue. Health insurance rates are still a mystery at this point, but we're going to project high, and hopefully, it comes in a lot lower than that. Otherwise, it's so early in development that we'll just have to use those building blocks and progress on.
And what's your projection for, I'm going to use the right acronym, for next academic year's ADM?
Our ADM right now, we're going to project 715.
715, okay. Great. And then in terms of, I know we talked about this recently, but I think it would benefit everyone to hear, just in terms of a teacher and staff recruitment and retention, how do you feel right now, halfway through the academic year?
We're feeling really good about our staffing. We were one of the few schools in the state that were actually fully staffed at the start of the year.
Okay.
So we're very pleased with that. A lot of efforts are going into retention efforts and recruitment efforts, as well as staff morale and professional development. So grant funding has come in to support that, teacher morale, and a lot of professional development activities that we talked about, conferences, workshops, even coursework, upper level graduate coursework.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
No school Thursday, Friday, correct?
Correct. Thursday and Friday, no school. Teachers will be busy with parent-teacher conferences Thursday and a professional development day on Friday.
I thought it was all set up and training for mini golf on Saturday.
Well, that's the superintendent's not a band parent. No.
I hear you got
Figure out some way to do it.
You got some basketball moves, is what I hear.
Oh dear, that was pretty fun. Harlem Tricksters on Saturday. Great fundraiser. Senior class raised almost $2,000 with that event. So thanks to everybody who came out. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Grimsley.
Next presentation, we've got Company 4 monthly report to the board and community.
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Dave Jarrow. I've been appointed as the chief at Company 4. And I'll tell you, since the vote for the resolution on the 26th, it's been nonstop. Nonstop, I mean to the wee hours of the night, just administratively trying to stabilize the transition. So we're working really hard, all 5 of the newly appointed board members. So I'm working on a revitalization plan that targets 3 specific time periods. One, the first phase is 0 to 60 days. And imagine the first phase being stabilization, making sure that we have control over the finances. An example of an operational stabilization is I had the mechanic who services the vehicles, the fire trucks, the ambulances, things like that, at the firehouse this morning, going over them, doing essentially the equivalent of what a state inspection would look like to make sure that they're safe to roll down the road. We did find one anomaly, one wire that was disconnected, and it happened to be connected to a brand new tanker. So a big safety concern, especially considering that we're coming out of Fodder Stack Road onto 522, and there's blind spots on both sides, and we've got a big apparatus behind us. So having that siren to announce our entrance to that area is an important safety issue for us and for the community. So we got that taken care of as part of the service this morning. So phase 2 talks about essentially day 61 until about 1 year. And that is working through to ensure that we have sufficient staff to operate the station, not just to run the calls, but that's obviously an important aspect of this, but it's also to help manage the company, the station, the apparatuses, while they're in station, things like that. So we're working on that during that second phase of the period. And then the third phase is 1 year to 2 years. And the idea behind the extended period is to work on optimization of the things that we build on in the first 2 phases. So we're well underway with the document. It's actually going to be a written revitalization plan. It will be submitted to the board for consideration, hopefully by the next time that we come here, that I come here to brief you on our progress. One thing that I think every jurisdiction across the country faces today is a challenge in getting people to volunteer. It's just tough. It's tough across the board. It seems to be tough to find people to take a job where they're going to get paid. I'm proud to say that we worked hard to make sure that we had a viable application and an evaluation criteria behind that to evaluate those applications. We have, as of walking in today, I have 26 new volunteers stepping up from Flint Hill District to support our initiative. The word is spreading, it's positive, the word is spreading fast. 26 volunteers, and I'm talking about professions like facilities management, equipment management. We have 5 doctors, five PhDs that have stepped up to this effort. We have 2 lawyers. We have someone that essentially was like, imagine a lobbyist trying to raise funds. They're willing to step up and help us improve our fundraising initiatives. So we have people from across the spectrum. Essentially, they're people in the community, and they've been waiting to hear a good story behind Flint Hill that they could get on board with. And I feel fortunate that I get to be in this assignment to lead that charge. And we're sharing this strategic vision with them so that they understand what they would sign up for. The youngest of this group of people, they're actually 2 18-year-old young men that are filled out their applications. So the idea of getting people like that into fire class, getting some of these doctors to become paramedics that are willing to run calls is massive for this community. So we're really excited about that. And I mentioned securing finances as part of one of our initiatives, and it's just making sure that we have proper financial management control mechanisms in place for who can and what kind of things we would buy through the fire department. We report to the fire levy board. We submitted to the emergency services coordinator our fire levy board submission for the last 6 months, and we went through that with our bookkeeper. And of course, we'll have those controls in place going forward. So we've got that locked down. I invited the membership to a discussion with the chief, a chat with the chief. The chief is what I called it, so that we could dispel social media rumors and things like that. And 3 life members and a long-standing member showed up, and we talked. We sat for 3 hours and talked about some of the misinformation that ends up in social media that affects what they think is their position in everything. And so I provided that kind of clarity. I said, if I'm the guy that's going to be responsible for this, and as the chief is always responsible, then of course I offered explanation and clarity so that they could feel better that a life member, as an example, is one of the hot topics. A life member is a life member is a life member. That's it. It's just if someone's in that position, they're a life member. So I tried to dispel those kinds of misinformation that end up in social media with fact from someone that's holding this position. And I could look them straight in the eye and give them, fact-based information, which I think was important at the time. I've started it seems like it's a political campaign. I'm almost going door to door in the what we call the first due area of responsibility for the Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company. And I'm talking to people and giving them reassurance that we're working on things like ambulance service, restoring that capability, getting an ambulance to them quicker if they have a situation that they have to deal with medically. As you know, or I hope you know, Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company has been without a first due ambulance since March 22nd, 2020, when they lost their license. Our Office of Medical Direction, Dr. Jenk, revoked that license because of a variety of different things, but the end result is the ambulance cannot roll out the door, as we call it in fire service, to provide emergency medical aid. And so what I did, I had to talk with the Office of Medical Direction in Richmond. And one thing that was brought to my attention last Wednesday, I believe, is that there are grants issued to different jurisdictions and fire departments and the like. And Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company is one of those. What they granted to us is a AED life pack and the stretcher system that a patient would be transported in to get into the ambulance and then to the hospital or wherever they're being transported. Those two pieces of equipment alone are in excess of $100,000. And the Office of Medical Direction, Office of Emergency Medical Services in Richmond had been trying to resolve this issue apparently for about 10 months. I explained or described a plan that I had that I would document and then bring to this board, and they accepted that plan if it's carried through. And I provided that information ahead of time as read ahead. So step one in that plan is to ask that we temporarily, at no cost to the county, no cost to the fire department, and more importantly, no cost to the citizens, temporarily relocate the advanced life support, what we call chase vehicle, call sign 1400, from right behind this building to sit, basically stage in front of Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company. What we have to do is we provide them what's called a shoreline. That is so that they can plug in their vehicle, and it keeps the vehicle ready to operate. It makes sure that the drug box that they carry and everything is fresh. So that's option one. That's short term, we hope very short lived. The second is we have to take steps. The Volunteer Fire Company, have to take steps to remedy the deficiencies that were identified previously, which prompted Dr. Jink to not extend a 2023 EMS license. And I'm sure you understand that's a big deal for any fire jurisdiction that operates in an EMS environment. So the second phase is of this plan that I proposed to you is to allow Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company EMS to operate under the county's license temporarily so that we can create best practices, if you will, or standard operating procedures to convince Dr. Jink that we're doing the right things, that we have the right processes, the right standard operating procedures so that we can run independently. So we come up underneath the county's EMS license temporarily till we can get these things resolved. And now you can hopefully understand why I've got 5 doctors that have applied to this membership so that they can help resolve that quickly. We're not looking at novice experience here. We're looking at experts to help us resolve this issue because, again, the community needs this ambulance in this area in the way that we're located. So I put that before you. As far as the second phase, that is working underneath the county's EMS license. We're looking at about $1,000. They have to do some very minor things with the ambulance because of the call sign of it and everything. But outside of that, my primary goal, if I'm filling this role as chief, is to provide fire and emergency rescue services to the community, first and foremost. And that's a priority. Secondary is the fact that we would lose $100,000 in equipment if we decide not to do this. And it's going to happen Friday. They're ready to come and pick that stuff up. But again, there were 10 months that could have been resolved, and unfortunately it wasn't attended to. So now it's a sort of an urgent situation that we need support on. So I'm hoping that you'll make that consideration in favor of these requests. They are temporary. There's really no cost. When we're talking $1,000 for people's lives, it's just simply not a variable to have to consider, I hope. But so we've done all this homework. When I say that we're nonstop 24/7 kind of thing, fire departments are that way anyway, but we're on call. But to stabilize this company and to revitalize it, more importantly, so that we have a good, viable fire department that fits among the other fire departments that do an amazing job in this county, we have to do some work. So that's where we're at. I am working with the other chiefs. I've reached out to them. Some have reached back, so that's good. Some work very, very closely with me, and they're great advisors, and I've known them from past fire support services. I'm also looking beyond just Rappahannock County when I look for advice and counsel. I grew up in a fire department going back almost 30 years, and so I have a lot of friends in the fire service going as far north as Winchester and Stephen City and working with their fire chiefs, going east into Warrenton, Manassas, Prince William County, and so on, and then going out towards Fredericksburg. I know these guys, we work together. So when we look at something like revising a bylaw or having a policy for XYZ, they send me their stuff and they let us consider that for use if it's usable. And, you know, plagiarism is a great sign of appreciation and respect, so we try to maximize there. But I will say that the board that you've appointed are working very hard. We're not in this for ourselves. We have a belief that we have a community to serve and we're going to do it correctly. Now, the compliance issues on the back end are necessary. We understand that. And so we're making sure to put governance structures in place to make sure we can address all of those kinds of issues. That's all I have unless you have questions.
Chief Gerald,
Yes, sir.
thanks very much for the incredible energy that you and your colleagues have brought to Company 4. It's deeply appreciated.
Thank you.
And it's worth noting you're not being paid for this work,
No,
so really appreciate it. Just a couple of follow-up questions, perhaps to put a little bit more meat on the bones of your presentation. My first question is, given that ambulance service from Flint Hill ceased in March 2020, things obviously have been idle for quite a long time.
Yes.
Do you have a timeline or even just a projected best guess estimate of when we could see an ambulance running out of Flint Hill again?
Thank you for the question. There's sort of two-part answer here. If this board approves us operating under the county's license for EMS, it's almost instantaneous. Now, we have 2 people that have gone through EMT school, but there's a process after you go to school that you have to go through, essentially a precept where you're turned over to run calls in your community. Those things haven't happened. So I'll be working with the other fire chiefs to place our EMTs in their jurisdiction temporarily so they can run calls with them. And they're basically learning from experts on how each of the different hospitals want patients transported, how they want medical information relayed to them in anticipation of the arrival of that patient. Those kinds of things have to happen. So it could be a couple of weeks. But the idea is to place them into these companies that are already operating under license, because otherwise we can't turn them over because we don't have a license.
Madam Chair, Mr. Curry, is there board action required to basically agree that they should operate under our county license for the time being?
I think it would be appropriate. The resolution stated that the company could ask the board whether you would allow them to operate under your license and it wouldn't be unreasonably withheld or something like that.
Okay.
If you go back. And so I did tag this item as action and presentation in case you wanted to do that.
Okay. And then a related question, in terms of the doctor's sign off on the EMS licenses, if you're brought under the county's license to operate in the near term, obviously in parallel, you'll be working to reinstate those licenses as a standalone company.
Yes, sir.
Do you have an estimate of how long that will take?
So I've asked Sean Polster, our EMS services coordinator, to set up a meeting with Dr. Jenk, and I'll plan to bring our doctor with us, Dr. Hugh Hill, to that meeting so that we can discuss what that timeline is. Okay. And I asked for the meeting to be either this week or very early next week. So I hope that gives you some sense of confidence that these things are front and foremost for us as priority items.
That's great.
Yes,
and then my final question, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. The idea of moving, I think I understand it would be during daytime hours, ALS 1400 over to Flint Hill. Obviously, you're not running ambulances, so the ambulance backup to ALS 1400 call, if positioned over there, would presumably have to come from other companies. Is that a correct assumption?
That's correct.
And then do you have any sense, and maybe Mr. Polster can weigh in, I see he's on Zoom, to what extent, if any, would moving ALS 1400 over there 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. undermine the response times that are currently achieved with ALS 1400 positioned here in town.
Now, I think Sean could answer those questions, but I will say that in theory, the other fire department jurisdictions within the county have the capacity to run a call in their first due. That's an amazing situation. With Flint Hill District not having the ability to simply roll out the door is we're trying to sort of balance the distribution of that capability so that all the districts have coverage at a minimum to get a person to the patient within, a short amount of time, so.
Yeah, I don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul by moving ALS
Absolutely.
1400 over there and leaving a gap somewhere else in the county.
Absolutely.
But I also see there's an urgent need to service that area. So if we have data or call response time data that informs us that it would not in any way undermine our current call times from this position, then I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Mr. Polster and I did speak about this, and so out of the gate, I would suggest that you empower Mr. Polster to position the vehicle where he thinks it's best for the community.
Okay.
Based on the statistics he has. You do know that you are paying for 3 days a week for a paramedic to be at Station 7, and that's to balance off the days when they don't have a paramedic or intermediate person. So you have that service anchored on that side of the county. At 9 that there's BLS, ALS is there from paid staff. And so that leaves 1, 3, and 5. 1 and 3 tend to be able to get to their calls. 5 is the tricky one, and they have had a bit of a resurgence here lately with membership. But I think daytime is tricky for them. When it's all said and done, if you have 7 going down 522 and ALS 1400 going down Richmond Road, you're hitting Castleton from either side. I think it's reasonable to move that, but I would leave that in Mr. Polster's hands to look at. He's done spider maps of how far you can get from each company and how many calls that we've had over the last year could have been reached by which company first. He's got all that data.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Chief Gerald.
If I may, one last thing. One thing that we're doing, in the resolution, there were the fire company shall, and there was an inventory of things that we're supposed to do. We find those to be critical paths to success. So we're tracking those things very, very closely to make sure that we meet those goals and objectives. So when we say we're going to brief here, we want to be able to account for all those completions and status on everything else. So thank you very much for having me.
I think Mr. Carney had some.
I'm
It's
sorry.
okay. I was going to say that I think Mr. Curry and Mr. Whitson covered sort of just a touch point of my concern about ALS 1400 being stashed or being located in Flint Hill was that my district tends to have that area that has a hard time being reached. And if Mr. Polster's data shows that that would be an appropriate location for it, then as Mr. Curry pointed out, that's in his preference. I just want to say to you all, thank you so much for what you have done and what you are doing for the community. It's absolutely incredible. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't think, oh, sorry, Mr. Fraser.
Yes.
If you put your mic down, please.
If you could back up a few minutes to where you said that you clarified with some of the members of the fire department their membership status.
Yes, sir.
Someone shared with me your email of, I think, the 27th.
26 maybe, or 27, 26, 27.
27th.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar at all with the FOIA statutes?
Yes, sir.
So I just wondered how y'all had determined that you would revoke the membership status of anybody. How did you go about that?
No one actually mentioned revoking anyone's status, membership status.
The email plainly states that they have to apply to be members, to reapply.
No, actually what I wrote, I have a copy of it, I can read it if you like.
It may be better if you do, because again, I'm trying to do this from memory, but.
Sure.
But
Yeah, I'll read it.
FOIA requirements would requires you to have an open meeting to make decisions, and you have to advertise that as date, place, and time.
Right. So if,
Madam Chairman, just a point of order, if we could have these updates as old business in the future, especially if there's action involved, I really think, with the time that we need to dedicate to this and that I'd like to hear from the public before we take a vote, I really think these should be old business items.
Moving forward, I think I agree.
And
with
that
you.
is how we've dealt with it in the past when we had them on dual dispatch unrequested monthly updates.
So what I'm going to read is 2 sentences out of an email, but it's to the point that you're raising, sir. And that is, third, everyone is encouraged to apply for membership to the Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Department, including past members. The people that are members were never taken off the rolls. They've always been members.
So they read it that way.
I can't, I know that some have, and some have read social media, that's what I mentioned earlier, as a different thing. Past members are people like one person on the board now. His name is Tim Bills. And Tim was a past member, to my point, was a past member, left membership, and is going to reapply. And the idea behind recruiting new people with 26 new applications is that we want everyone to apply. And what I tend to get on my soapbox about when I'm sort of preaching this is to the groups out here is we'll take members from 16, and we don't really care what the other end of that number is because everybody's got value in helping to contribute. But the idea is everyone's encouraged to apply. Absolutely, anyone and everyone's encouraged to apply.
But you sent that, the recipients would have been current members, and you were encouraging them to reapply.
But nowhere in this email, and I can forward a copy if you like, but nowhere in this email did we say, if you were a member on the 26th, you're not a member on the 26th.
Well, I understand it.
So that was
all
never
right, wait a
said.
minute. I didn't see that. But when the recipients are those members, that's how it was taken. Can you see that?
I can't, I don't know what people are thinking
No,
on the other end.
wait a minute. I just said something, and I want you to listen to what I said,
No, I-
so that we're on the same page here.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not trying to give you a hard time, I'm just want you to see that when you sent it to what people thought they were current members, they were the only recipients, and you're telling them to reapply to be members, how would you take that?
But the word reapply was never used.
Well, not reapply, but to apply for membership as if they were not members, but you were sending it to what should have been current
Sure.
members, so that language shouldn't have been in there if they were considered current members, correctly?
Well, I think there are two different
No, no,
perspectives.
please don't interrupt me,
Past
sir.
members, or does it say current members?
Mr. Carney, please don't interrupt me. I'm trying to get a point here. It may take me longer to do it than you would.
I simply can't.
How would you take that, sir? That's the question I'm asking you.
I would have asked the question. So
It
I have a clear
was
answer.
only sent to those recipients that should have still been members, and you asked them to reapply,
I didn't
or
use
to
that.
apply to be members.
Yeah, reapply is a very different
If you had sent it
connotation
to 8 or
it.
10 or even one other person that was not considered a current member, then I can see maybe your argument.
Yeah.
But I can see their argument
Sure.
when they received it.
Sure. Yeah, we could probably stand here all day. I would. I can't interpret how someone would interpret something
I
else.
asked you how you would interpret it.
I would have asked, I just thought I answered that. I'm sorry. I would have asked a
I
clarifying
don't think
question.
this is funny, sir.
No, trust me, I know. I would have asked a clarifying question if I had doubt.
So you will advertise meetings of this new board of directors, date, place, and time, publicly.
Sure.
Where are you going to do that at?
On our webpage.
Somebody told me it was taken down.
That's not true. See, that's misinformation. I'll give you an example of misinformation, if I may. Sherry Hamelhoff is a lifetime member.
Right.
She came to me. We talked for probably 40 minutes or so. She's a nice lady. I've known her for a long time. She came to me and she said, I was told by my son, who I think she said was in Virginia Beach, but I was told by my son that you're going to take my husband's plaque down that's mounted to the front of the firehouse. I said, Sherry, I don't know where you're hearing that. I don't know who they is, but I can tell you it would be over my dead body because I believe strongly in tradition and I believe strongly, and the board would stand here, they would tell you the exact same thing. But I believe strongly in the tradition of fire service, and one of the things we do is honor our past fire heroes and our life members. So I'm just hard pressed to try and interpret what somebody else would think or what someone else would do.
Well, I'm sorry if I went down the wrong path, but I just
Sure.
saw what the email said,
Sure.
and I saw the recipients, and I assumed the same thing that they did.
Yeah.
So I would say in the future, perhaps you should watch how you word things and make sure that if you're sending something to convey a certain message, that you send it to the right recipients.
Sure, no, I appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I know you've been spending a lot of time, all of you have been, and I really do appreciate it. It's
Thank
nice
you
to
very
see
much. Thanks.
action happening at the fire department.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Going to be action on the EMS license.
Yeah, I'll put forward a motion that we, grant permission to Company 4 to operate under, the EMS license of Rappahannock County Fire and Rescue Department. I think that's correct phrasing.
I'll second.
Are we attaching a dollar amount to this request? Because it says $300 attached in the letter that's attached to the agenda, but we just heard $1,000.
Is this to label the vehicle or what?
It's a label vehicle, yes.
So I guess it would label and unlabeled later.
Yes,
Yep.
correct.
Yeah, it would be an operational expense for any company to label their vehicle anytime they want, but I suppose you could.
No. Look, absent operating under the county license, there's no coverage, so we understand there are gonna be some fees incurred, and as you point out, they'll be reimbursable with fire levy funds, so that's my motion.
Right, we have a motion, a second, now discussion.
Is there a reason why this couldn't have been done at any time prior to this?
No.
Why?
It was offered to the company over many months, and they didn't want to do that.
This particular
Yes.
process was
Absolutely.
offered.
I believe at the 11th hour, they said, oh, we'll do it, when they were sitting in this room.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All those in,
Excuse me, just for purposes of clarification, in terms of the request attached to the agenda, this is only item number 2, allow FHVFC to operate under Rappahannock County EMS agency license?
That's the motion as I understand it.
Okay,
That's
thank
my
you.
motion.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you.
And just to clarify, on the other question that a couple of us had regarding daytime relocation of ALS 1400, I understand that that's an operational analytical call on the part of our emergency services coordinator, Mr. Polster. So I'm not calling for board action on that point, but it have the expectation that Mr. Polster will weigh in.
Agreed.
So they will be moving around now or not be moving around?
Well, they move around all day. They were encouraged to,
But Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., where will they be?
well, I can't answer that question. They're encouraged to travel the county to understand the county better. There are many times at different fire companies, and I would, as I said before, my recommendation for you to leave that up to Mr. Polster on where that vehicle is positioned. And that might be, is it a day that the county's already paying for a paramedic to be at Company 7? Maybe that plays into it, maybe it doesn't. Does it depend on whether Company 1 has a paramedic on duty or not? And I would just leave it to him to sort that out.
Well, I do appreciate that, Mr. Curry, but I'm going to need to see some reporting that leads to the conclusions that are reached on a daily basis as to why why 1400 is positioned at different places at different times through the day. I would like a daily update.
I don't think that's practical to, I mean, Mr. Polster manages that group, not me, and, certainly not
I
individual
understand that it
from
wouldn't
the
be
board.
coming from you, it would be coming from Mr. Bolster.
Right.
But it's paid for by all of the taxpayers in the county, and so we need to have some level of confidence that it is being used effectively.
Well, if he's already doing the work to figure out where he's gonna position them that day, what's so difficult to go ahead and forward that information to us?
I'm just asking him to document his processes.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if it's in the wrong place, you all said it. If somebody dies, it's our fault. I don't want to have them somewhere and be needed somewhere else. And they're paid for by everyone countywide. They're not just paid for by folks in Wakefield District.
I would hope that, I'm not trying to interrupt.
I would hope for a lot of things too, but you know, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride.
I was just gonna say that I would expect all of Mr. Polster's decisions to be data-driven, not politically or by policy set by political decisions that we would make, but driven by data.
Which is what
that
I'd like
he-
to see.
I was just gonna finish, that he is empowered to make. And so I agree with you in the sense that these decisions about where things go should never be political decisions.
Correct,
They have to be driven by data.
correct.
So that's my position. So if Mr. Polster has data he wants to share with us, which, I mean, he probably does.
I mean,
I'd love to see it.
my data is if, I have no problem if 1400's in Flint Hill, if everywhere else is adequately staffed and has good response times. But if there's an issue and 1400's in Flint Hill and somebody down on Slate Mills Road has to wait 5 to 7 more minutes extra for a response time, then I have a problem.
And that's why I brought it up. I mean, company, you know, on the backside of Red Oak, where
Yeah.
it's really tough. It's
Y'all
not
have
a
got
paved
it,
line,
I
you
mean,
know,
Hampton
road.
District's got it in the
Yeah.
Hollis, y'all
With
got it down the same neck of the woods that I do. That, you know, the point of access is down 522, and that means 5 to 7 minutes more travel time. And that is critical time for calls. And, you know, we need to have some level of assurance that like you said, it is data-driven, that we understand the processes and how decisions are being made. And I think that it would be absolutely negligent of this board not to know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I didn't seek board action regarding the positioning of ALS 1400. We have a professional that we hired to do that. What I didn't say was that it should be based on call data, actual call data. And I don't disagree with you that reporting out to us and other interested parties on sort of the trend of where ALS is positioned on any given day or at any given time, where that trend grew from and why it has become established in a way. Because if, let's assume that Flint Hill makes sense during daytime hours, then we'll see week to week to week that ALS 1400 will be there 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then here during evening hours. But once that pattern is established vis-a-vis Flint Hill's new request, then certainly we should all be privy to whatever information led to that decision and whatever trend we should expect on where ALS 1400 will be positioned on an ongoing basis.
Data is gotta be the way to go with this, in my opinion. I know that he's been doing a great job taking the information from dispatch and other areas to write the data that he's given us so far, not about 1400, but just about everything that's going on in the county with regards to emergency services. So my only concern is asking for something on a daily basis may become
I
just
think
too
there's
time consuming.
There's going to be a trend and there'll be a pattern
Yep.
for sure. And to Ms. Smith's point, if we understand sort of the analysis that was done to lead to whatever that pattern is on the physical location of ALS 1400 at any given time during the week, that should be, I would think, sufficient.
Well, the data's already there in several ways. I mean, response time is 8 minutes is what we're shooting for. We have 24/7.
Out the door in 8 minutes, on
That's
scene
correct.
25 minutes.
I understand that, Mr. Curry. That's why I said response time, reporting to the station should be in 8 minutes. So, but if you look at Chester Gap, and I ran some times over the weekend. I didn't physically run times, thank goodness for Google Maps. But Chester Gap to Flint Hill is 10 minutes cold. So if you have calls on that side of the district, you're already getting response times in 8 minutes or under. I mean, your folks are in the building ready to go. And then from where they are positioned now at 1400 right here behind the courthouse, from here to the fire station, the other end, which is not quite all of it down toward Benvenue and such, but that's 5 to 7 minutes. So a big part of Wakefield District is already covered very quickly with 24/7, 365 response, just by virtue of where they're located already. And it's really unfortunate that that's been lost in the conversation.
I don't represent any part of Stonewall District, but I have friends and family that live over there, so I'm concerned about Stonewall and the FT Valley, where I also have friends and family. So I think if Mr. Polster, again, I'm just reiterating the same thing, if he's using data to come up with a decision whether he does it on a daily or a weekly basis, he's already got the information generated. Forwarding it to us is not a difficulty.
So if there's an action, just someone make a motion so I don't
don't like
confusion.
making motions or doing business before we hear from the public.
I think it's critical that, that the analysis of whether ALS 1400 could make sense at Flint Hill, I think it's critical that move forward now, and I don't believe that any board action is required for that, so. We'll leave it to the professional.
The one great thing out of this whole conversation, I think, is the fact that 1400 has become what we had hoped it would become, and now everybody's worried about where it's positioned, because it's doing a great job.
It's an asset for sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Is Mr. Polster on the phone today?
Yes,
There's a Sean P.
I think.
Can we talk to him and see how hard it would be to get him to put together a report for us?
Fine with that. Mr. Polster, are you there?
Yeah, my choices changed.
Please hold.
I am here. I think the biggest thing is with the utmost respect, is you guys determine what kind of data you want. I heard a lot of discussion, it was all over the board. And as you know, data is only as good as what you're trying to figure out. And if what you're trying to figure out is where the best place to put something is, that's a data point. But just to provide data, I don't think it's going to be helpful.
Yeah,
That needs to be more confusing.
Sean, it's Kier. All I was asking is if you make a decision to move ALS 1400 over to Flint Hill from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays or whatever the end result is, it's just simply what was behind that decision. And I'd asked the question earlier, which is I think the key point, just to know that it won't undermine response times vis-a-vis ALS 1400's current position in the town of Washington. That's all I was seeking. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And please understand, it really sounds like you guys think you have a Cadillac in the county when you actually really have a UDO. I mean, if you want to fund a program for fire and rescue that serves everybody equally across the system, there's a cost to that, and we're not there. So please realize that when we have.
That's not what we're asking for.
I can absolutely do that for you, sir.
Thanks.
I don't know why we keep going down these rabbit trails. These are not the topics of discussion, sir. We simply asked a question, if you use some sort of form of matrix to position 1400 at any one given place, that you could allow us to review the same data.
Yeah, but there are a lot of rabbit hole discussions that you were having individually, so I was confused on what data points you were actually.
But you're creating your own rabbit holes to go down.
So
I don't think. Thank you.
do we have the specific that you needed, Mr. Polster? From Mr. Whitson?
He's muted.
Okay, all right.
It's really simple. I mean, we can over-engineer this whole thing if we want to, and we can spend the rest of the afternoon doing it. But if he's already using some sort of data or metrics to distinguish where he's going to put 1400 from one day to the next or 1 week to the next, why can't he share that with the board?
I think he just said he would.
It's really simple.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move into public comment if we're ready. Okay. Public comment, if anyone wishing to speak, please be recognized when you come up. Please give us your name and the district you're in, and let us know what you're thinking. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah.
Susan Babcock, Hampton District. Mr. Whitson. I have a gift for you all. I'm laughing because you're talking about rabbit holes, but you're the rabbit. And I really just want to say, I'll be quick. The rabbit is longevity, peace, prosperity, luck, and creativity. You add the water, sensitivity, intuition, and inner peace. Together, that makes more diplomacy, compromise, and hope. So I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, hand these out.
That's awesome.
And hope that you will let it help you, because it's here to help.
Thank you, Susan. It's good to see you.
I'm so happy to see you.
Thank you very much.
Right, anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, ma'am. Sheila Gressinger, Hampton District. I normally don't wear a hat, but it was windy. I didn't want my head to blow away. Plus, it keeps my brains warm. Anyway, with this, I wasn't going to say anything, but then with this conversation that's been taking place about a vehicle and everything, there was a request made, and it seemed to be for a specific amount of time to remedy a certain situation that is occurring at the Flint Hill Fire Department. This vehicle is only supposed to be placed at the Flint Hill Fire Department to fulfill a specific request that came from a higher up that then would enable the Flint Hill Fire Department to start to fulfill their obligations, which they had not been able to perform for quite a while. So all this conversation about whatever, I think misses the whole point, that this is only for a specific period of time, and perhaps this gentleman could clarify that, and then we could get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to go to Zoom World. Anyone on Zoom wishing to speak, please raise your Zoom hand, and Mr. Curry will unmute you. I'm not seeing any hands raised on Zoom. I'll close public comments. All right. Moving in, we've got the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, I put forward a motion that we adopt the consent agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we have two resolutions.
Yes, Ms. Lane.
Ms. Lane? Join me on this video. Whereas Catherine M. Lane retired from public service to the citizens of Rappahannock County on January 31st, 2023, and whereas 30 years ago, in January 1993, Mrs. Lane first served the citizens of Rappahannock County as an employee at the county's jail, then located within the sheriff's office, and whereas 15 years ago, in October 2007, Mrs. Lane transitioned to the role of Deputy Commissioner of the Revenue, and whereas during her employment with the county, she was dedicated to and conscientious about her responsibilities, constantly serving others, and whereas the members of the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors will always consider Mrs. Lane a colleague and friend, now therefore be it resolved that the members of the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors hereby express their appreciation of and commendation to Kathy M. Lane for her long and distinguished service and wish her good health and best wishes during retirement. And be it further resolved that this resolution be spread across the minutes of the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors for all citizens to reflect upon the service and accomplishments of this dedicated public servant. Adopted the 6th day of February 2023. Thank you.
Congratulations, Scott.
All right. Miss Ralph. Whereas Margaret Peggy R. Ralph retired from public service to the citizens of Rappahannock County at midnight on February 1st, 2023. And whereas Ms. Ralph started her employment with the county over 40 years ago on April 1st, 1981, in which capacity she first served the citizens of Rappahannock County as a deputy within the Rappahannock County Clerk of the Circuit Court Office. And whereas on March 1st, 2010, Mrs. Ralph was elevated to serve elected office as the clerk of the Circuit Court and has since that time been elected twice by the citizens as their representative in the clerk's office, and also for many years served as the clerk for the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors. And whereas during her employment with the county, Ms. Ralph was exceedingly dedicated, loyal, and dependable, constantly serving others. And whereas the members of the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors will always consider Mrs. Ralph a colleague and friend. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors hereby express their appreciation of and commendation to Margaret Peggy Ralph for her long and distinguished service and wish her good health and best wishes during retirement. And be it further resolved that this resolution be spread across the minutes of the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors for all citizens to reflect upon the service and accomplishments of this dedicated public servant, adopted this 6th day of February 2023. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have no appointments.
I'll just want to clarify for the record that thank you also for adopting the resolution of support for passage of HB 1443 through the consent agenda. Dr. Grimsley has been masterful in her coordination on that, so we'll get that scanned up and sent out today.
Do we need to sign that?
No,
No.
the chair does and I do. So
Okay.
I do have that with me. Actually, you want to sign it?
Sure.
So we can give it to Shannon. She can.
I thought the consent agenda was supposed to speed things up.
Done.
Quick action. Keep us informed.
Thank you. No.
All right, thank you very much. Moving into the old business, going first to pole-mounted speed display signs.
Okay. As the board's aware, you formally elevated this to a priority action item. I was able to meet with the regional traffic engineer for a second time, during which we discussed specific sign locations that he could support. I've enumerated in the documents those locations and also in narrative form as well as in map form. Those being in Sperryville on 522 at the transition to 25 miles per hour coming from the FT Valley Road intersection. In Sperryville on Route 211 coming from the park at the location of a 30 mile per hour speed advisory sign before a turn, which is up towards the park from the two restaurants up that way, that were up that way. In Flint Hill on both sides of the village. In Woodville on the northbound side where it transitions, it says 25 to 35. That'd be on the Culpeper side. And then one that he thought possibly could be supported but not in the current location where it changes from 45 to 35, because he felt that that location probably wasn't appropriate, and that it should be, the transition to 35 should be closer towards the churches, post office, coming from deeper into Viewtown Road. Might be easier to see that in map form. So just to reiterate, Sperryville, the two locations. Flint Hill, you know both sides of town there, Woodville, the one side. And then Amosville, the current location of the transition from 45 to 35 is quite a bit away from the busy area. He thought that was too early. It's better seen in these pictures. This is coming up the hill. You can see the 35-mile-an-hour sign. He suggested that it would be more appropriate about where the Baptist Church, Bethel Baptist Church is, and you can see that here. There is another church before that.
They're already getting a ticket by then, though.
What's that?
They're already getting stopped. If there's a deputy, they're already getting a ticket.
Yeah, in that area. And so the VDOT representative thought that it wasn't necessarily, didn't necessarily need to be 35 in that area. And for him to support, he didn't say this as directly as I'm saying it, for him to support the pole-mounted speed display sign in that location, that regulatory transition would have to change to where this number 1 is, which is up here by the entrance to Bethel Baptist Church. So that would happen if we asked for this. He would tell us we would first have to do a speed study. If we ask for a speed study, they'll change it to whatever they think. If we don't ask for a speed study, it'll be sort of a sleeping dog sort of situation.
He's saying that to put the sign back there, put the sign with the speed limit sign, you'd have to move it up.
It would be 45 in all this area would be 45.
You can't do that.
I figured as much, which is why I identified that as potentially possible. He would not support it in this area. One thing that could possibly be done and was discussed at the last meeting is that they do have portable signs. They're not cheap, and when you buy them, they last for 2.5 weeks in the field. If you want to receive that speeding data that we talked about for the fixed positions, it's an extra feature. And the salesperson said, generally, if people do this, they buy extra batteries and they buy that feature for the speed tracking. So 2 of those, just in a quote to understand what those costs are, would be around $8,000 or so to get 2 of those battery ones with extra battery and having the ability to collect speed data. I think we could probably get VDOT to give us permission to put the temporary one in the existing 35-mile-an-hour sign. Mr. Nesbitt said he would work with us. That's, I think, a different process when it's temporary as opposed to permanent.
We get a temporary permit, but we don't ever move it.
Right. And it might show you that the speed is something different than, the data might tell you something, might tell VDOT something. It might show the 85th percentile of the whatever is, maybe they're right, I don't know. Maybe people are already going 45 there all the time.
If they're temporary, would they do the moving? Or?
No, there are devices, we would have to manage the equipment and the batteries and all that stuff.
So below where we got a quote for 5 fixed signs,
Right.
do those signs collect, store, transmit data?
They are Wi-Fi enabled, so periodically someone would have to go nearby and download the data.
And they need calibration?
Well, they're calibrated. They're not regulatory, so it's not
Okay.
like you're relying on them to be so precise that you could give a ticket.
Okay.
So they don't have to be calibrated to that extent, but they are calibrated in the shop.
Do they count cars?
Yeah, well, they count cars, speeds, statistics on the speeds, all that stuff.
Maybe I'm getting into too much many questions here about this, but will it timestamp that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so potentially you could go, the
Yeah.
park could go, anybody could go and say, wow, this day we felt like we had a gazillion cars, and you could literally go download that data, see how many cars literally went by that day.
Right,
Potentially.
or go 60 days later and download the last
Yeah,
60
sure,
days
sure,
worth of
sure,
data. Yep. And there was, thought that, I pushed hard to get the second one in Sperryville. It didn't make the list, and I pushed and pushed. And that was only considered acceptable because of this safety concern of his.
So there's not an opportunity where 211 goes down to one lane in the Water Penny Farm vicinity?
No.
That's a shame.
Not to say that if you had a temporary one, you put it there and you gathered some data, it might change their mind.
I mean, I know that's a problem area for sure.
What if you swapped out one of the permanent ones for a temporary one for Sperryville and moved it around?
Well, I know that one on 522 as you come into the village, that one would be
Yeah.
a great permanent sign for sure.
This one he said was by far the best location of
Yeah,
all of them.
I mean, that one is,
Yeah.
and then coming out of the park too, people fly. And oftentimes VDOT does us a large favor and puts a sign as you come off the mountain just to say, high traffic, high volume, speed ahead, slow down. And I don't think we can count on them to always do that, especially during the times of the year when the park is the busiest. So I think that is a good opportunity to have a permanent sign there, but I do think that where it narrows down to one lane in the vicinity of Water Penny would be a good opportunity to have one of the temporary signs. And then if we learn something there, we can move forward. But we have one at our disposal for other places in the county that may need it. And, there may be something like an event where it would come in handy too, where VDOT may not have something to spare for us.
So in the case of the safety location, it would be on a sign that had the curved sign and the 30 miles per hour all suggested with your speed is underneath it.
Are there restrictions on where you can put the temporary signs?
I think that's a lot more flexible than Mr. Nesbitt said he would work with us on that for just a temporary land use permit as opposed to a permanent sign.
Culpeper seems to move them around the school areas and also construction areas.
In town, that's a totally different deal with VDOT because the towns manage that. The regional traffic engineer did express some frustration with town versus not town. And
Welcome to the club.
Well, as a business owner in Sperryville, I just want to say that I support whatever where the brewery is off of 522. I see and hear traffic. I mean, everybody knows about it, but it can get so intense, and so I'm just really in favor of whatever steps we can take to try and calm everything down. And I think gathering data is really good. It will inform us about some things.
Can we talk about the standard timers allow up to 5 settings per day? Does that include, we can turn it off at night? Turn off the lights at night?
I dug into that only preliminarily, but basically what I've been told, it's all programmable.
Okay.
We can do, there's a lot of things we can do. Make it dark at night or only pop on if someone's really speeding or something like that.
Yeah, that would be my preference.
I do agree that the permanent and some that we can move around would be a nice combination because the ones we can move can prove whether we need a permanent or not.
And you can pay more and have them connected. Like have a little cellular Wi-Fi thing in there and you can sit at your desk and, but I don't think that's what.
So what action do you need from us?
Well, I'm not positioned to actually purchase them, but if these locations are where you want to do it, I have the quote, I have some purchasing steps to jump through, and then I think we'll need to appropriate some dollars to do this. I can be working on all that and make sure I have competitive procurement nailed down, and you can make the money available at your next meeting.
So it's just confirmation of location, which gives you the total number.
I also have to apply, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
but he pretty much told me if I apply for these ones.
The Newtown Road speed limit, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
That speed limit can't be,
Right, and so he basically said, don't ask for a speed study if you don't want a speed study.
but a movable sign there would be,
But a movable sign, I think we could probably get permission to put one up for a couple weeks at a time and see what data you get.
Yep.
they're more of a pain. Someone has to service them every couple weeks. As the batteries
Somebody
die.
can service them, but I don't think he's willing to move it.
Well, you'd have to take batteries out, put batteries in, or pick it up and move it somewhere else.
I say, I believe he would be willing to change batteries, but not move it.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure he wouldn't want to move it.
I hear what you're saying.
All right, so
I just have one question about the location in Woodville. Is it right where would it go?
At the current regulatory speed
So
location.
right where that sign is?
Yes.
So I'll go talk to
Yeah, which is, it's really,
Yeah,
there's not much going on there.
No, there's not.
You would probably use your radar enforced sign, which you're not allowed to have, technically.
Wait, what?
This sign underneath,
That's his radar enforcement.
yeah,
yep.
they're not allowed.
All right, so
VDOT put it up, so
do you need to know the paid
I need to know
versus-
which these I need to, which permanent you want me to actually fill out the application and apply for, and also start working through the procurement so that you're positioned to actually, give the money to buy them at your next meeting, and hopefully I can tell you that the permits were approved. I don't want to buy them before the permits are approved, even though he said that we were good.
So do you need a motion for that?
Yeah, I would prefer that.
Does anybody have I think it would be a good idea to get a temporary one that we can haul around, unless you all think it's not.
No, I
I
like
thought
that
they came
idea.
in twos.
Oh, they come in ones, but I just got a quote for 2.
I'd like two.
Two. So then I'd like to make a motion to authorize Mr. Curry to proceed with the application with the 5 fixed signs and
Well,
2
4, because
four.
the Viewtown Road is not,
Oh, isn't it 1, 2, 3, 4?
oh, it is 5, I'm sorry, you're right. 2 in Flint Hill.
So
Yep.
5 fixed signs and 2 temporary movable signs in the locations listed.
I'll second that.
We have
What's
a
the
motion.
fifth permanent? I'm so sorry.
Yep.
What did you say?
Well, you got your Sperryville, Flint Hill, Woodville are all permanent.
2 Flint Hill ones.
2 Flint Hill.
Oh, both ends. Okay, thank you.
And who moves the movable signs up, just from a
Well,
practical standpoint?
It's someone under my control.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Any further
Who
discussion?
second? Oh, Fraser second.
Any further discussion?
I'm really glad that this is moving along. I look forward to getting them hopefully posted before we have a lot of tourists coming through again.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you,
Town-
Mr. Curry. For
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr.
It's moving.
Regional Traffic Engineer.
Town boundary line change request.
Sure, I'll take the lead here. You all recall, at our January meeting, I passed along the results of a meeting that, Ms. Donna and I had, Mr. Curry also, with, Town of Washington officials, and basically the idea is to bifurcate, the language in the old draft boundary line adjustment agreement so that the various items that we were seeking agreement from the town are separated out from the agreement. So now there's posted to board docs a clean, I'll call it penultimate version of the boundary line adjustment agreement. It's clean only in the sense that it's been stripped of all of the various and sundry items that we had put to the town as requests on our part. And I think we have a path forward, and to encourage discussion and invite any questions, I will go ahead and put forward a motion that Mr. Curry and Mr. Goff and any other county staff that need to be involved transmit to the Town of Washington government the latest version dated today, the boundary line adjustment agreement, with a request that the town agree to the following: a reciprocal release of covenants on the town hall and 310 Gay Street. Number 2, a limitation on the final end use of the parcel that would be brought into the town, so as to not allow for the construction of any residential dwelling units. Number 3, to share 50-50 any meals and lodging tax revenue generated from any businesses that ultimately might be based on the currently county portion of the parcel. Number 4, agreement to realign parcels along Courthouse Road in cooperation with the county if and when needed. Number 5, an agreement on the part of the town to connect Company 1, Washington Volunteer Fire and Rescue, to the town's wastewater treatment system. And finally, number 6, to agree to a 10-year moratorium on any further boundary line adjustment requests. And so those 6 items have all appeared in prior versions of the draft agreement, so hopefully it's clear. But the idea is to get this process moving along, and I think we can do these things concurrently. 1, pass the draft agreement to the town, and then 2, ask the town to demonstrate through legislative action or through some other means their agreement to the 6 items that I've mentioned in my motion. That's my motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
We're no longer asking for the property behind the courthouse to be removed from ARB jurisdiction?
My understanding is that the town is in the process, and I believe it's on the agenda for their next town council meeting, that they are removing ARB exemptions for themselves, which will also, basically, no one would be exempt from ARB review,
We don't
including
have any
us.
other property except for the town.
I
I thought we were going to do that. The motion that we voted on last month, or whenever it was that we would take care of those issues before we move forward with this, and here we are putting this now before that.
yeah, my understanding
So
is that
this motion is actually in violation of a previous board vote.
how do you see it that way?
We already voted that we would ask the town to work on those issues separate
Okay.
from the boundary agreement. So now you're trying to push the boundary agreement forward without resolving that issue about the ARB.
Mr. Frazier, let me amend my motion to include item 7. Agreement from the town to exempt county properties from ARB review.
When did this get attached to board docs? The clean version?
The clean version got posted last night.
Okay, well, I mean, I reviewed the agenda yesterday, late morning, and it wasn't attached to the agenda.
I finished
So-
it yesterday afternoon and it was
Yeah,
posted.
I take exception to things posted so late. It's not really practical for us to be informed. It's not practical for members of the public to be informed. I don't
This
think
really
it's a
would
good
be
way
an
to do
agenda item.
business.
It's,
Should I
it's
second
a,
mine?
yeah,
Just parliamentary, or if
Yeah, I'll second with his amended.
you accept his friendly amendment.
Sure.
and as I said, this has been kicking around since last February. It's the same agreement, nothing's different, it's just pared down, so the public and we all have been looking at it for over a year. Same language, there's nothing new.
Well, I mean, we've heard that about other things before, and then when we dug into them, they were substantial differences. Particularly the comprehensive plan.
I assure you that the only action I took on the draft was to move out all of the items that I've now included in the motion that we're seeking agreement from the town regarding. So the draft is clean and there's no new language in it.
Any other discussion?
I think we need to see what this so-called agreement offer is before I'm like Ms. Smith on this. If this was attached last night, it's actually an addendum item as far as I'm concerned, because we didn't have time to look at it on Wednesday.
Has the county attorney reviewed this new draft?
I have not.
Thank you, Mr. Goff.
I think in our haste to move forward with this, we're doing a disservice to ourselves and the community at large.
I'll just respond by saying that I took the time to revise the draft. I posted it when I finished that work. And again, we're working off of a master document that's been floating around for over a year. So I think it's a little disingenuous to suggest that this is somehow sudden and new, and it was an agenda item posted on our agenda when it was released and posted to board docs, that we knew it was coming. And
No,
we
no,
know,
with
but
all-
no, sir,
Okay.
let me finish. And so I don't think there are any surprises here at all. And I think it's a clean agreement. I put a lot of time and effort into this, and I've made my motion, so let's vote. As far
With
as
all
I'm
due
concerned.
respect, you are not authorized by this board to be working on this, so how did we know you were working on it?
I told you at our January meeting.
You were
that-
not authorized to work on something like this, sir.
Okay.
I mean, we had a similar issue with the comprehensive plan, and we had to work through it as a group, and I wonder why we're not willing to do it on this.
To
And
me,
when we
this
dug
looks-
into the comprehensive plan, which we were supposed to be taking edits only for grammar, spelling, and there were supposed to be no substantive changes, but there were heavy, heavy edits to that document.
We found
In
out there was a
particular,
substantive
in
change.
regards to the Water and Sewer Authority. So I, as much as I appreciate your vouching for this work, Mr. Whitson, I don't feel like I can support it today, but I do understand if you all want to go ahead and take a vote.
Yeah, and the motion, just to be clear, is not to approve the boundary line adjustment or sign the agreement. It's simply to transmit the penultimate draft of the agreement to the town, and hopefully next month we can vote on whether or not we agree with the town on the boundary line adjustment. So the action is just to move the process along, and I've tried to articulate as clearly as possible the specific requests that we're making of the town, and I think this has been batted around long enough that we should all have acute familiarity with the details. So I just don't agree that this is some sudden late-breaking news that's catching us off guard. We've been dealing with it for a year, so thank you.
So what time did you post it to Board Docs last night?
I don't know. I told you,
It
Ms.
was
Smith, it was
yesterday.
last evening.
Yesterday afternoon sometime. He emailed it to me and I attached it in Word format. And then he followed up with that with a PDF document, which I placed on.
Well, wait, I don't understand. Let's back up just a second if we can, so that I understand. Now, last month, we read this letter from, or maybe a month before that we read this
Right.
letter from the town saying that they wish to take all this language out that is not an ordinary boundary adjustments, and I don't know what that means because there's so many
Right.
communities across the Commonwealth of Virginia, I don't know if there is an ordinary, but let's just say that there is. And they wanted to strike language that's not normally associated with boundary adjustments, and
Right.
that included the ARB reference, that included the covenants, that included revenue sharing.
Right.
They wanted all that out.
Right.
And this board voted that we would move forward with that stuff separately.
So that's what I did.
No, you just put it back in there.
No, I didn't. We still, what we talked about last month, which to your point is who authorized me, I raised this as a discussion item and I explained that the town was likely willing to agree to our requests if they were separated from the document. So I presented you a clean document, a clean boundary line adjustment agreement, clean meaning none of the none of the additional items, requests are embedded in that. And then, as part of my motion, I listed the items for which we're seeking agreement from the town. So I'm asking, transmit the draft to the town and make a request to the town to agree to those 7 items that we just
That was
discussed.
supposed to be done first, according to the vote the board had at our last meeting on this subject. That was supposed to be done first. So so now this vote would be in violation of that. If you wanna park the boundary line agreement language document for a future date till we work on the issues that are separate from that boundary line, then you would be moving along according to the last vote this board had on the subject.
I think we're splitting hairs here. All I'm asking is to transmit the clean version to the town. That's it. I'm not asking us to sign it. I'm not asking them to sign it. I'm saying, please transmit the clean version. We broke out all of the 7 items separately, and they can, however,
Which was
through
supposed to be acted on separately.
Can I finish?
Yeah, but I'm just trying to put that back in there because.
Yeah, we're talking past each other here, Mr. Frazier. I did exactly what I said I was going to do
I
at
don't
our last
remember you
meeting.
saying that you were going to do this.
Is this an order of operations concern? And maybe you're both saying the same thing, that 1 through 7, there's an expectation that those things be done before you would adopt
Exactly.
the agreement?
That was the board vote last time.
I don't recall the vote, I have to go back to
We're
look at that.
we're not, I'm just asking to pass the document along so that they can see that we've done what they were seeking from us. I'm not asking our board to sign an agreement. We can look at it next month.
This is a volley going back to them.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it doesn't make any sense to make a motion and ask them to agree to these things without an attachment that demonstrates our good faith effort to present an agreement that is in line with what they requested.
This
I mean,
board doesn't want a boundary agreement. It's that board that wants a boundary
I understand that, Mr. Frazier, but this document goes back and forth, and I'm just simply trying to keep the process simple, which clearly it now is not, unnecessarily, I will add. So let's take the document and send it to the town along with our 7 requests, and we're not signing anything today. We're not agreeing to anything today. We're sending it back. That seems like a reasonable process.
The vote was that staff was going to work on those 7 items before we worked on this.
Okay, well, I don't see any difference.
I don't know why you don't see any different.
There is no, the document has been revised. It is stripped down to its barest form. We're providing it to the town for their reference, along with our 7 requests, which, to your point, county staff will address with the town government. I don't know what you're asking me to do differently. I don't see what difference it makes. We're simply providing the document that is the underpinnings of the 7 items that we're seeking of the town. I don't know why you're making this so difficult.
Because if they come back with one and not the other, then you're gonna lead the charge most likely to approve the boundary agreement, and we still got those 7 items out there that they no longer care about looking
Well,
at.
I think it's a negotiation, and I'd say that's presumptuous on your part to tell me what I'm going to do.
Well, you did this without me knowing about it.
Oh my gosh.
Okay,
How many months have we been
Wait a
talking
minute,
about
Madam
this?
Chair.
I don't
That's
think we're going
ridiculous.
any different conversation
It's
here.
absurd.
I'm gonna call
It's
for
not
the-
absurd, you just
I just
did
did.
something with no authorization from this board, Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Fraser,
Madam Chair, why do you always try to put me down when I'm trying to make a point?
because you're the one yelling. into
I'm not
the
yelling.
mic.
If you want me to yell, I can notch it up a couple. I'm just trying to make sure that somebody hears me. Apparently, I'm not getting it across because I don't articulate very well, or I'm not projecting very well. But the process last time we voted on this was for staff, which is Mr. Curry and his staff, to put forth these items that this board is seeking. And it didn't happen. Instead, we get this, which I have great respect for Mr. Whitson, but he was not tasked with doing this. And neither did we know this was going to happen until it shows up on the agenda.
To be clear, in January, the discussion was precisely to do what I've just done, which is to bifurcate the agreement so that the requests are separate from the agreement itself. So now we have a clean agreement with no requests in it. And then I framed a motion that I tried to make as clear as possible of the 7 items for which we're seeking agreement from the town government.
But
If following January, I don't know what else I would have done.
this
other than
vote
what
is
I
in
just
violation
did.
of that. Staff was supposed to put that together, forward that to the town, at least let us look at it first, I would say. And then this would be worked on separately.
I don't recall that we took any action at our
That was a
January
vote. I made a motion, and I believe you seconded it, and you were on the phone at the time, and that's what the vote was.
I don't know.
I updated the narrative that the board recently coalesced on a bifurcated process through which tangential concerns will be removed from the BLA agreement and addressed prior to execution of the BLA agreement. Supervisor Whitson is preparing revised documents for the consideration of the board, which will be attached from the bill.
Prior is prior to this. These are going at the same time now.
Acted on. The board controls when the agreement is acted on. There's nothing happening today through the motion that would press the board to act on
Which I
the
already
boundary line
said.
agreement at any time, Lane.
So we have a motion and a second. I'm going to call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Ms. Smith abstained, I think.
In the future, can we find out about something, all of us at the same time? Is that such a hard thing for us to do as a board?
Moving on to zoning ordinance
I
amendment.
asked a
regarding-
question,
Oh, I
Madam
thought it was
Chair.
rhetorical, sorry.
I asked a question. Can we, in the future, starting with the rest of this meeting and subsequent meetings in the future, that we all receive the same information at the same time?
In the spirit of transparency and given that I know your sensitivity to exactly what you articulated just now, that is why in January, I raised the bifurcation step so that we were all on the same page. And apparently, according to the results of our January meeting, I was tasked with doing what I did today. So I would just leave with you, Mr. Frazier, that because I know you're sensitive to not wanting to be left out of decisions, I raised this as a discussion item primarily in January. And then I took the time between January and now to do what I've done.
There was no language in any of those motions on the January meeting that instructed you or any other member of this board to work on anything.
Okay.
We'd have to go back and look. Yeah.
I don't know why I have a memory of that and y'all don't.
I don't.
But I asked a question. Can we from now on, can y'all share information with us at the same time you get it?
Believe board docs shows up at the
No,
same
not
time
board
for
docs.
everybody.
If he puts it on board docs or sends it to Mr. Curry to have it on board docs, he was working on it prior to me knowing about it. Did you know he was working on this?
After the January vote,
Yes.
expected him to work on it after the January vote.
Why would you expect that?
Because I believe he's correct, that that's what he was tasked to do.
There was nothing in that motion that instructed anybody to work on anything except staff. He's not staff, he's a member of this board, and I would expect staff to work on something and get it to this board all at the same time.
The funny thing is, I generated work product, and instead of gratitude for taking the lead to hammer out something that we all discussed as a group in January, I've been berated for the last 15 minutes, and I think that is a shame.
I think it's a shame, Mr. Whitson, is that you don't feel that you need to, first off, follow the votes of this board as an individual member, and then share with us anything that you are working on.
Well, I would just like to say that I got it on board docs just as you did this morning, and we don't need to give him permission to work on a document. He can do it.
Right. But he says that he was tasked to do it, and there was nothing in any vote that did that.
Well, so
Somebody needed to
even
do it.
if he's
Were you
Staff
not?
was told to do it,
tasked-
staff.
I know, but I'm just gonna say this, even if he's not tasked, I didn't know that. Even if he's not tasked, he's allowed to do it.
Right, but if I started doing stuff like this, y'all would have heartburn with it.
I don't think I would.
I'd probably be excited.
It'd be great. Generate work product.
No, I've generated work product and have it
I'd love
fail
to see.
miserably at this board.
I'd love to see some work product
All right,
of anything.
we're not,
Go for it.
I would
Anything
like
you
to-
want.
It's really out of
Gentlemen,
order,
I'd
Mr.
like to
Whitson.
go
That's really
move
beneath
forward
you.
on the
We come to this board
agenda.
on a quarterly basis with very complete and thorough reporting from the building committee to move forward important work that we work on independently and have great respect for this board in our presentation. And to make comments like that is really beneath you.
My point is that I put work into something for which it made sense for me to do. And if there's work that any member of the board brings forward that we review together, I'm happy that someone's done work. That's all.
And as I reiterate for the 6th or 7th time, that's in violation of the last
Makes no sense.
motion and vote that this board had.
I just don't
All
think
right,
it's a
we're-
violation because he's allowed to. So it might not be exactly what we asked for, but it doesn't mean that it precludes it.
I guess
But I
my,
agree. I mean, if you came with something, I'd be happy. If you were like, hey guys, I wrote this and I didn't tell you about it, I'd be like, thanks, Mr. Frazier. I mean, that's just me though.
You haven't been to all the meetings I have, sir.
Well, that is true.
all right, let's move on to old business number 3, zoning ordinance amendment regarding vehicle access to events.
I requested this be added to the agenda because it's languishing on the planning commission. agenda because we don't feel like we have clear guidance from the board as to what you would like to see.
So Mr. Goff and I spoke about this referral back. The board sent specific language to the planning commission in June. I think the board wanted to see that specific language, or as massaged by the planning commission. I think this is getting more important as time goes on, particularly given recent AG opinions. And to that extent, I took the initiative to write a resolution for your consideration that would refer the language back to the planning commission to act on it within 100 days. If they don't, then the board can pass an ordinance amendment on your own.
Super important.
Remember, in passing it to the planning commission, there was discussion of, what is the right number of vehicles? It said 10 when referred, but there was referred with the message that we want you to think about that. I know that was the subject of a lot of discussion with the planning commission on where it should apply and shouldn't apply, and what the potential unintended consequences might be. But the reasons to pass an ordinance amendment like this is to set a very common requirement across all the counties, so it would also impact certain state mandated by right uses. And so you can't carve out really for some other things. So this says 25 versus 10. If the board thinks a different number is appropriate there, or thinks this should just go away, we can do that. But given where the state is heading with their involvement in your land use decisions, public safety remains an area that you can regulate from a land use perspective.
I have a question for our attorney. How do you define gathering?
I'm sorry, how do I define
Gathering.
gathering? Well, I would just say that it's the Webster's dictionary, ordinary use of the language. That's really, it doesn't really have any special meaning outside of that. I mean, a gathering is a group of people, a gathered group of people assembling in a certain area at the same time.
So my question, go ahead.
I would just say that whenever you're looking at code ordinances and codes, the first reference is always to the ordinary use of the term.
Yeah.
And not some constrained or technical definition unless that's required by context or by it being a defined term in an ordinance.
Right.
Now, it may be that the board would want to consider a definition of a gathering, but the reason why Mr. Curry and I decided to stay away basically from that is that the idea behind it is public safety. Does it matter if it's a gathering of banjo pickers or a gathering of poker players? It doesn't from a public safety point of view.
Right.
Can the ambulance get in there and get out safely if somebody does have a medical emergency? Can a fire truck get in there and get out if there's a fire and people are trying to flee away from the place? You need to have a passageway that's large enough for all the vehicles to be accommodated in an emergency situation. So if you invite a definition of gathering, then that's when the cherry picking generally will start.
Got
or
it.
the argument.
So my question is then defined as such. If you have, for instance, a farm stand, and it's a good farm stand,
Right.
over the course of 8 to 5, you could have 75 cars going down.
Right.
No gathering?
This would be a gathering at one time, and if that
Yeah.
language needs, so if you have amassed 25 vehicles at a particular time,
Yeah.
I think that would be afforded the definition of gathering by a court, common sense. But no, I don't think that if you looked at the number of cars coming into a farm stand over the course of 8 hours, and it added to, if you had 25 or more, if that's the magic number at one time, it'd be a gathering.
Yeah.
And therefore enforceable.
But over the course of time, it would not.
It wouldn't, I think that the gravamen of the word gathering is that it's gonna be a simultaneous assembly. If somebody's got it or can pull it up, we
yeah,
can.
I don't know if you can read it. Or I can, here.
So just to be clear, I'm just wondering about, So we're really talking about a condensed period of time where multiple vehicles are showing up.
Yeah.
Well, the ultimate question is, should some number of vehicles be able to aggregate somewhere on a narrow road? And is that safe? And if the board doesn't have a concern for safety with that, then don't do anything like this. If you do have a concern for safety, that you want to be able to get public safety law, fire, rescue in, at the same time the fire happened and people are trying to get out, then, you know, this is your only avenue because you can't regulate certain uses other ways.
The one thing I can see happening is when we put a number of vehicles in there, I should give people the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not going to. I could see someone playing a game saying, oh, you know, we had this event on this little lane, but we only had 20 vehicles, you know, after the fact and after we all observe an event that raises concerns. And so I guess for me, the question is how to craft this ordinance language in such a way that prevents sort of misuse or abuse.
Yeah, I think you're attempting to, by adopting such language, you're preventatively trying to tell people you can't do this on a narrow road. Now, if it does happen on a narrow road and enforcement is not right there, a photograph will bear out whether there were 26 cars or 24 cars.
Right.
And if there are 26 cars, then that's a violation. You can, you know, work your way through the violation side of things.
I think it's a good start.
But maybe 25 is the wrong number? I don't know.
And how many days are we asking planning commission?
Statutorily, 15.2, 2286 sets it at 100 days.
I'm sure we can work through it by then.
I share your feeling. This is a big priority.
My optimism.
No, but this
And I don't know that I mean, I know that we had talked about some challenges that this would create. I mean, I think I wasn't on the planning commission at the time, but I think hunt events were brought up as a possible area of issue. And then, I mean, what I always think of when I read this is sunrise service on Red Oak on Easter morning.
Yeah.
That's a very narrow lane going up a very steep hill. And are there 25 vehicles there?
I think we talk about.
I think Red Oak, the public road, I think does allow passing.
Okay.
But the private
Up to the
trail at the very end driveway might not.
And I thought we talked about law enforcement being present, or there's like.
You could, those are all discussions that kind of popped around the planning commission and went nowhere. That, well, maybe if law enforcement's present, you can have a carve out, or because they would theoretically be able to direct traffic. But, you know, that didn't matriculate with any actual change in the language and check back with the board or a public hearing or anything.
Okay. Well, if y'all want to pass the resolution, I'll move it forward on the agenda at the planning commission level.
So I would say with the resolution, if the planning commission does nothing, you could pass this language.
Okay.
You're also sending a strong message that planning commission, if you do something and send back different language, then you have an option. Pass this language or whatever the planning commission sends to you.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea of how many adjoining communities have language like that in their ordinance?
I haven't seen any. I think this was, I mean, I'm just saying, I believe it was Mock Reach Out.
Let's be pioneers.
Yeah, I think so. Only because we're grappling with the issue of the by right agritourism and whether or not there was going to be a serious safety issue with a place that had a by right agritourism event that attracted a large gathering of people, and then, you know, God forbid, the pavilion where they're having it or something catches on fire. And then, you know, is this a zoning issue? I think so. I mean, it's a public safety issue, which is a carve out for what otherwise was going to be pretty much a kind of Wild West zoning picture on the agritourism.
Mm-hmm.
For real.
And it got, I think this board, I believe several members voiced that concern to me, that there was pretty much a Wild West thing going on with, and I don't know if you recall, but I issued a rather lengthy opinion about what constituted agritourism. And it's pretty much everything except for having like these bouncy balloon things and all that,
Now you just have to enjoy agriculture.
that's right now, apparently all you have to do is breathe country air, and you're engaged in
Or at least
agritourism.
look at it.
Yeah.
Or stand there and look at it, right? Look at it, or pet cows or something, I mean, I don't know. So, anyway, it just seems like it is a public safety issue that is a zoning concern. And I know that some members of this board, I believe all of you had kind of expressed at some point or another over time, what can we do about
Yeah, we gotta reel it in.
limitations? I'm sorry.
So my previous question was, we are open, my brewery, which is an agricultural, thing, we're open. It's not an event. And we can have 50 cars, 100 cars come in, all scattered about over 7 to 8 hours. Now imagine there's a time where there's 24 or 25 and everybody's gotta leave like the same time a bird is leaving a tree.
Yes.
Does this apply to that?
Yes.
Because there's no gathering. It's just normal operation.
It is a gathering of 25 at one time,
Doesn't matter
and so
what
you
Okay, that's my
should
question.
have a
That's my
road,
question.
an
Yeah.
entrance road that allows
That's my
vehicles
question.
to pass, which I
That's
think
my
you do.
What you do.
Yeah, I don't know, but yes. But that is my question is that it is so broad,
Yeah.
this agritourism is so broad,
Yeah.
that if it's just daily operations, can that be considered
Yes.
a gathering?
Yes.
A gathering, I think, would be, it's without any strings attached. It's not a gathering for this or that,
Okay,
or for a commercial purpose or a non-commercial purpose.
Okay.
It could be a gathering for a wedding. It could be a gathering for, as Ms. Smith points out, a sunrise service. It could be a field party. It could be a festival. It could be an apple dunking contest or an archery contest. Doesn't matter. It could be a brewery, like let's say commercial. But that has no bearing on whether or not it's safe to get in and out of there.
sure, absolutely.
Have we put enough thought in this as to who and how we will enforce it?
Yeah, that's a good
Well,
one.
like I said, there's two. One is to try to say that people will follow rules, and so you put it on the books, and then people know about it, and then they will try to follow rules, so that makes things safer. And then second, it's written in such a way that even after the fact, if you get a photograph of 27 cars, then that's a notice of violation. You don't actually have to be there. Now, if you are there and there's 27 cars, you can say, you're not allowed to do that. But still, all you can do is notice violation. Not like you can have some sort of injunction in your hand and say 2 cars need to leave. But
Yes, I agree with Mr. Curry that in the light of a recent opinion, it has kind of just really turned over some zoning that we have. It's very different.
Ultimately, zoning is about public safety and
Yeah.
welfare, and the creation of a harmonious community. It's all about that flowery statutory language that precedes every zoning ordinance in the whole Commonwealth of Virginia. So really, that's the ultimate justification for what a zoning ordinance does. So when this board's acting on that, the paramount concern is always going to be public safety. And when you allow, it's like the old ordinances that came in after that tragic Pennsylvania movie theater fire back in like 1910, in which hundreds of people were killed because they had allowed overcrowding. And there was no ordinance that subjected the movie theater to any penalty for there being an overcrowding. So zoning law number 1 was, okay, in any zoning district in which there are movie theaters, the fire marshal shall have the power to set the occupancy. So the same idea is true here. If a building can only safely accommodate 80 people like this one, and there's a sign up from the fire marshal that says that's the maximum occupancy, then to exceed it violates the law. To the extent that people may choose to violate the law, well, that's why I've got a job.
the parallel is that, the current building code uses the egress routes as to set your occupancy. So that's exactly what you're doing.
But I forgot where that fire was in the movie theater, but I believe it also was because it had doors that opened inward, and of course, then you couldn't have panic bars. So you have to have, commercial doors have to
I think it was
open out,
Phillipsville.
which this courthouse doesn't qualify. So we're, I understand the argument where people go over to the building office and they're required to do certain things that we don't have in our own county buildings. And now,
When we renovate this building, you might have to.
We might have to. And that new building that we're talking about, it will have.
It will.
But, again, other than somebody taking a picture and, I guess being a neighbor, how are we envisioning this being enforced?
That's it. That's it. You know, and see if you have a repeat, and if somebody has a family reunion, they have 28 cars, and somebody complains, it's probably gonna be a friendly letter that says, you might not be aware of this, but, you know, we don't allow situations where there are 25 or more cars on a parcel when there's only one lane in and out. You know, please take that
That's the
under
county
advisement.
park over there.
The next letter, when they do it next week, is not gonna be as friendly. And if it's 3 weeks in a row or 4 weeks in a row, that's when the attorneys get involved and say, Judge, you need to stop these people from doing this thing. It's not safe.
Our own county park doesn't actually have a lane in and out. It's not that width.
It might not be, but, you know, can it hold 25 cars? I don't know. That's good. Great question.
It's used almost every weekend in fair weather for family reunions.
So, you know, the frontage road from VDOT probably passes 2 cars, but the little throat that goes into the parking lot doesn't. So maybe if we're gonna have more than 25 cars at the park, we should make sure the throat is capable of passing cars in and out.
It does
Or it's not a big deal and we don't do it.
throws it back on the owners to make sure that their properties comply.
Right.
I mean, generally, the assumption that I think that this board should have is that when you validly pass an ordinance such as this, that people are going to comply with it.
We can't comply with our own parking lot. We don't have the width out here where it goes past the old building.
And maybe that has to be fixed if this is, of course, to the extent our zoning ordinance is going to apply inside this town. Kind of don't know about, but.
That's true.
But
I think two single width entrances would also satisfy that requirement, right? So you have one way in, one way out, I think we're also gonna be okay. Such a way that vehicles may pass each other in all weather service.
And that encompasses two, yeah.
I think so.
Since we are kind of forging new territory here by addressing this through public safety, I know a lot of times Ms. Summers will be the sole staff member at planning commission meetings, and I really think it's important for either the county attorney or county administrator to be present for the planning commission meeting to be sure and keep us on the straight and narrow in terms of the legalities of something like this.
As long as there's not a pending application wherein the county attorney is now acting as a public attorney general, so to speak, giving opinions to the general public and not simply addressing the needs of my client, the board of supervisors.
Okay.
The planning commission but the planning commission is this body's advisory board.
Advisor did, but when you're looking at an actual application for a special exception, I don't know that you want my opinion of the case.
Okay. We can work on something and get it to you.
I can be there next week.
That would be great. Thank you, Mr. Curry.
Do we have a motion? We need a motion, right?
I'll make a motion to send this to the planning commission for review.
So is this adopt the resolution? Or? So if you adopt the resolution, then if they ignore you, you do it anyway. I don't think that's gonna happen, but you cannot pass an ordinance unless it's had a public hearing at the planning commission, unless you were to do this.
Okay, so how should I make my motion then?
Move to adopt the resolution as presented.
Okay, I move to adopt the resolution as presented.
We have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Mr. Frazier? Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Whitson?
Aye.
Mr. Carney?
Aye.
And I also. Good debate.
Thank you, Mr. Goff.
Thank you. Thank you both. Sign ordinance amendment.
In December, the board asked the county attorney and county administrator to go through the proposed ordinance that planning commission developed with fine-tooth comb and then send it on to the Berkeley group. Art and I managed to do that late last week. Given the timing, I thought it would be appropriate to share it with the board. In case you didn't like what we did before sending it to the Berkeley group, but I think your prior direction was consensus, was for us to go through it and then send it to the Berkeley group. The document is attached. We didn't make very many changes. But if you have any questions about the changes, Art and I are both here to talk about it.
I guess we fell out of sync because the planning commission did have a motion and a vote to send this to the Berkeley group before you all reviewed it. However, I'm sure we can clean that up at the 15th, meeting on the 15th, and review these few changes and get it out to the Berkeley group.
One of the a major thing that we did do is we removed this liability section that's been in the code for a long time, and don't believe has ever been actually used, enforced.
Line?
230,
170-98.
yeah. And so somehow the sign owner is supposed to hold us harmless.
And it didn't make any sense. I don't think that the county should act as the private insurer for someone who owns
Or vice
a
versa.
derelict sign that might fall on somebody.
So inasmuch as it's not been applied, that's another reason why you probably don't need it.
Line 66, area of a sign. Generally, most localities draw boxes, rectangular, 8-sided, whatever. But I worked in a situation of installing signs in a rather large area at one time, and PetSmart is in a form of a wave. And if you were to take and draw a box around PetSmart, it would be a very small sign.
Well, that's good here. We don't want a big PetSmart sign.
Yeah, we do. I mean, the thing is, if somebody wants a sign for their business and they want it to be a little bit different, you shouldn't discriminate against them. So whether it says PetSmart or it says Billy Bob's Brewery.
Yeah, this is typical language that you do see in
Well, what
ordinances.
we had done in Fairfax City, the zoning administrator, not a technician, but the zoning administrator and I sat down and they drew a box around each individual letter and calculate the square footage of the sign that way.
Yeah, I suppose if it's freeform letters on a building as opposed to freeform letters on a white background with a blue box around it or something
Right.
weird like that. The reason why this is highlighted is because the note, which you can't read here, is that there's an intention for there to be some figures. And so if the board or planning commission would like to provide more granularity on how the shape is
But just
done.
saying, if they had drew a rectangular box around that particular sign, PetSmart, or anything that is a little odd or different, the sign couldn't be read from the street. It would be too small because of the loss of square footage of the sign that's in the background.
Yep.
And the background is of no use to you. You're actually looking for the sign that says something.
Yeah. Yep. Then the other E is because that's the 3D thing, and it's attempting to draw a box around the 3D thing, basically,
Right, so.
based on a perspective.
A sphere would go in a box.
Right. Or a chicken.
A chicken.
Yeah. At Royal Farms.
3D chickens,
Yeah.
Rolls Farms.
Yeah.
So I think Ms. Smith heard what you said, and maybe the planning commission will want to change that.
And I would just say that, again, if you have any comments, either your own comments or comments from folks that have read the proposed language, please be sure to have them to the planning commission by the 15th, because we feel like we're in a position to send it on to the Berkeley group for review.
I think we also don't want a gigantic P with tiny little letters that come after it, and they have this massive P on the side of the building, so, yeah, I don't know. That PetSmart, I don't know.
Each letter was about the same size, but because they had to draw a rectangle around the
But you have to
whole.
think people might take advantage of it somehow.
Well, we're supposed to be trying to,
Be business friendly?
no, we're supposed to be business friendly, but we're supposed to be discouraging cookie cutter type businesses and signs, and if somebody comes up with something that's unique, then we penalize them for it.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is, I'm not gonna send this to the Berkeley group just yet, and after next Wednesday, sounds like it'll go to the Berkeley group.
I would think the planning commission should review it before it goes on to the Berkeley group.
Do we need a motion for that, or just going forward to the planning commission?
I don't think so. If they send it to you, you're sending it back to them
Back.
with a couple minor changes.
Okay.
And I know we'd spoken briefly about this, but I think it's really important that once we're done with this, that there be some kind of Gary, I can't remember the language you used, but some kind of user guidelines.
Right.
So that the public can digest this very quickly. And I would really like it to happen concurrently so that when this goes out, there's not a lot of clarity on what people are and aren't allowed to do, say, for instance, where to put their hunt signs, their real estate, whatever.
We can work on those guidelines so that they're hitting the public same time as a public
Yes.
hearing. I don't think you want those sort of guidelines embedded in code, because code is a specific animal, but I do a parallel document is, to help
makes
people
sense.
interpret, is not bad.
All right, let's move on to the classification and compensation study. Thank you, Ms. Jewell, for being here.
Thank you. Yes, at your regularly scheduled January meeting, I reported to you that department heads were re-reviewing their job descriptions and making final edits to those to be submitted back to county administration in mid-January. So obviously, mid-January has come and gone at this point, and I did receive about a dozen updated job descriptions from across 6 departments within the county. I am still awaiting responses from 2 departments that have let me know that they are actively working on their job descriptions and should be submitting those in the near future. The 12 updates that I did receive have been forwarded to the consultant to be re-reviewed and just ensure that they are in the appropriate spots on the classification pay scale. And so that's the current update. I'm just waiting for those last 2 departments to provide additional information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like a 5-minute recess if we could.
Sure.
Thank you very much for that. All right, where are we? Going into
Yes.
new business. New business, town inquiry regarding 290 Gay Street.
Sure, I'll take the lead on this. Mayor Whited, approached me about the possibility of the town paying to renovate 290 Gay Street, which is the old county administrator's building right on the corner here, the little building. And town government's thought is they'd like to move their town clerk in there. And so I wanted to raise this with you all to see, number one, if there'd be any interest in moving forward with some kind of arrangement with the town. Mr. Curry has pointed out, and it's in our notes, that we would not want to sell that property, but perhaps a lease agreement that's highly favorable that would incentivize and support the town investing money in the renovation of the building might be acceptable in lieu of a sale of the property. And of course, we agreed previously to fund the renovation of the Methodist Church, which is 310 Gay Street, I believe, which I think is contemplated as flex space for when we do renovations on other buildings that house county employees. So that might obviate the need to hold 290 Gay Street as flex space. But again, I just wanted to bring this up, and if we were to take any action, it would simply be to ask our county staff to talk with the town about some kind of agreement to lease the building. And then I would expect that we could review that next month to see if it's acceptable.
If I could, former Mayor Sullivan broached this, a rental or lease of that space when he was mayor, and the board at that time felt that it was perhaps, what's the word I'm looking for here? It was premature because we hadn't formulated our plans. And right now, the board hasn't formulated its plans on which one of the plans that has been brought to you by the building committee and the architect of what that building will be used for, or if it will be moved. So I think here we are again, we're a bit premature in discussing what we're going to do with that building before we know how it ties into a larger plan. I don't think that we should encumber any part of the campus right now until we know what our plan moving forward is.
So some of those options considered moving that building.
Correct.
Right.
So if we have them putting money into it in its current state, I think that would be more of a hindrance, because if we're gonna move it, we probably don't wanna do much work to it that would be damaged in the process.
Do they have a timeline on this?
Does the town timeline to renovate it?
Or like, hey, we'd love to be in 6 months, 3 months, a year?
Well, I think just from a town services perspective, the town clerk now is working out of one of the offices in the schoolhouse, and I think that there's some attractiveness of placing the town clerk in the midst of our other local government services. So I think they're interested in doing it sooner rather than later. But, again, I'm raising it. I don't know how you all feel about it. I mean, currently it's being used to store PPE, and it's in not great shape as a little building. So the idea that someone else might pay to renovate it was attractive to me, at least, which is why I wanted to raise it.
Well, I can understand that and appreciate it, but at the same time, if they're gonna put any money in it, they're gonna probably want a long-term lease, which would overlap what our plans may eventually develop with that building as part of it. So I don't know, I don't see how, I mean, if they were gonna rent it month to month, they wouldn't want to put much money in it. If they were gonna rent it for a year, the same thing. If they were gonna rent it with the idea of it being a ground lease type thing, where any money they put into it, they eventually lose when it falls back to this board, they're not gonna do it for a short term.
Right, I'd certainly understand your perspective relative to having a defined direction for the courthouse concepts before you move forward.
Would there be some room for a middle ground where they don't, I mean, I guess it's totally not usable right now?
Well, it is.
Is it?
Administration used it. It's got better electric than when administration used it.
I mean, is there a solution where they don't really put that much money into it, and as Mr. Fraser was saying, it is very short term?
We might have to ask RAC to stop using the base. We need storage space somewhere for a bunch of old radios and a lot of PPE that we got from the state. So that's got to go somewhere. Maybe we can find a spot in the jail for it to empty that building.
Yeah. Well,
If we could solve that problem, then if they wanted to use it month to month, that's different.
Well, yeah, and I like Mr. Carney's.
Mayor's on, and he's raised his hand.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Oh, sure. Mayor Whitehead, we're gonna unmute you.
Last time.
Asked, oh, there we go, yes.
I would just add that, I just raised it with Ms. Whitson, because the last meeting, it sounded like the building committee deemed it surplus to your needs at this point, but we're in no great hurry. But I appreciate Ms. Whitson bringing it forward, so, our lease still runs for quite some, I don't know if it runs for quite a year yet at the schoolhouse, so if the board needs more time to contemplate, that's fine, of course, but we would, if we move forward, I think I can speak for the council, we would want to enter into a very long-term lease.
I'm
Thank
sorry, I didn't hear that just right. They would want to?
Would want a long-term.
Yeah, that's what I figured, if they're gonna put any money in it.
Yep.
Any one of us would.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like what Mr. Carney said, which is, I guess it depends on when they would need to vacate their current space, but maybe there is some in between where a little bit of upkeep could be done to the building, make it usable, and then it's actually in use. But with more flexibility built into whatever the agreement is than a super long-term lease agreement or a significant capital investment. So, okay, well.
Thank you for bringing that to us. It sounds like it's not a
Sure.
done deal, we've got to see what we're going to do with our buildings first.
And it sounds like it could be potentially, if we decide to keep the building and we don't want it, and we want them to renovate it, down the road.
Yep.
Who knows?
Okay.
Excuse me.
Thank you. All right, frequency of volunteer fire company association audits.
Oh, this is another item Mr. Whitson asked me to put on the agenda after we had a conversation sometime last month or two.
Yeah.
And basically asked the question, why do we do these every other year? And this came to the board at one point in time for a decision point, possibly in 2018. Just a foggy recollection, and at that time, the thought was, well, it was about $9,000 a year for 4 companies. There wasn't a thought that you wanted to spend $18,000 a year for 8, but 7 companies plus the association, so it's 4 and 4. Here in the last couple of years, we've been doing 4 audits a year and then 5 audits and 4 and 5, with Flint Hill going every year. So this most recent year that we were under contract for and haven't still yet to receive the documents and haven't paid for was $11,250 for 5. So the question is there an interest to perform the audits annually? I noted earlier that there is value if and when these documents are presented timely to the companies to have that audited balance sheet that they can then use for their grants and whatnot. And Company 1 has been frustrated that they don't have the 2021 audits yet. And of course, staff is frustrated that they don't have it yet, and we've conveyed that to our consultant. And we'll be looking at multiple vendors going forward to see if there might be a different way or a better way to handle these fire audits. So it's not.
But a smaller firm should be able to handle that, and, I mean, I know that, there used to be Robinson, Farmer, and Cox, I guess they still go by that, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But, the principles probably have changed over time. We used to have Wally Cox come to our meetings.
Well, and
It'd be difficult
looking
for
back
him to
in
make
our
that.
files, RFC's done the county audits and the fire audits for a very long time. But that doesn't mean that it's not appropriate. We competed the whole package, I think again in 2018 through RFP, and settled in on using RFC again based on the value added that they had. But that doesn't mean that that will always be that way. But it's a cost, so it's still, $9,000–$10,000 a year for 4, so it's $18,000–$20,000 if this projects to some other firm for all of them in a year, and that's extra funds, but there's extra value and information coming out of that. The conversation that you had at your last meeting and referred to the Fire Levy Board regarding the policies, that you'd probably dovetail with this sort of thing to some extent. I can tell you that that discussion at the Fire Levy Board meeting maybe was met with lukewarm reception, and not wanting to have too detailed policies that make it hard for our companies to do what they need to do.
I think that maybe folks need time to review it too, but definitely these are broader approaches, but I also heard that folks need time to at least look at them and kind of dig into them, just to see if there is something to
But
talk
I think
about.
there was comfort that there were several gems in those documents that at the very minimum could be implemented.
Could be adopted. So is this spelled out in the association agreement?
No, it just.
The audit occurrence?
But you mean the services agreement, it
The
just
services
states that the
agreement?
county can audit, the records need to be open for county audit, it's just been your practice.
Okay.
Not
do
even
it
a policy or
every other
anything,
year. Got it.
well, like there was a vote in 2018 or something, not
Okay.
to do every year.
Okay, I see.
So if you want to change that, we just need to know, because we should be engaging a company right now to do the next round, and we can't really do that until this round is closed.
I think we need to, in my view, we need to consider getting a different audit firm so that we're positioned to then ask for timely audited financial statements.
Yeah.
I feel like we'd be putting the cart before the horse to say, let's do annual audits when we don't have an audit firm that can get, what would it be, biannual? I mean, every other year. Biennial audits done on time, so, I mean, we kind of a bigger issue.
We're going to keep, whether directed by the board or not, we are continuing to look at our options and whether we compete. The contract we have now is for a couple years and extendable for so many years. We have one more extension. We might not extend it for all parts of that.
Yeah.
They've been very good for our local government audit. I think,
Yeah.
according to them, there were many challenges due to GASB 87 for the local government audits that swamped them this year.
Did we also add on to that the trigger for multiple failed audits? Did we?
Well, I think that goes into the policy discussion, and that was some of the conversation at the Fire Levy Board.
Okay.
Is there some sort of or else built into the policies that if the audit is bad, then what does that mean?
Yep.
What is the response? You don't get money, or you're on an immediate improvement plan? Who writes, what happens?
Yep.
And that should be prescribed.
Yep.
So then, it's not emotional, it's just, this is the process we follow.
And it gives protection, as Ms. Smith brought up, she was at the fire levy meeting, and it gives protection everywhere, not just for us, but for the companies, to have these kind of things built in.
Yeah.
So that they can say, hey, no, we have the data.
Yep. All right. Looks like we're moving past that one then into zoning ordinance update project roadmap.
Some time ago, there's had discussion about Art and I reviewing the use table in detail. We did start that work, and we've been pulled in multiple directions from there. But also in that discussion was to have the Berkeley group help us with the roadmap moving forward for the broader changes to the zoning ordinance to realign things and also to make sure the process and procedures are nailed down and ironclad. They have provided the attached information, a memo, as well as proposed table of contents, shifting things around in the zoning ordinance, as well as a crosswalk so you can go from where to where they are recommending. They're suggesting a multi-year timeline where phase one starts in the 2023 with organization of the document, community engagement, drafting out the permits and applications, use matrix, use standards and definitions, and then move on to 2024, first and second half, with 2 more tranches of information, getting into more details and areas. They do reference that the board's been on a parallel path for sign ordinance, and they wouldn't really be tackling that except for moving things around. And whatever they come up with when they review it. They provided a cursory review before. This has been available for a little while, and I passed it on to Mr. Light, and it didn't advance it. So now I guess we need to know there's funding in the budget for Planning Commission to engage a consultant. The consultant has said they can set time aside for you. Are we going to engage a consultant to go through this zoning ordinance?
I think we should. I don't know what, I don't recall in our last fiscal year budget what was built in.
We were budgeting about $20,000 a year recurring funds for Planning Commission support. And then in the current fiscal year, there's an extra $50K one-time money thrown in to give it a big push.
Okay. So it seems like we should, as part of our budget preparation review, contemplate what money, I mean, I don't know what our balance is on the 50,000.
We haven't spent any of it.
Okay, so do we need to?
So we need to get them going,
Yeah.
And then think about long-term, if this is a multi-year process, then we'll talk about that.
It's critical.
But the 70K, or if it was 20,000 annual, the 90K might do it all,
Yeah.
right? I haven't talked to them dollars and cents yet.
How would we envision that this would work, though? This public engagement process, for instance?
Well, I think that they envision having town hall type meetings before you get to a public hearing, kind of structured procedural process.
That's good, because we need more one meetings where if somebody asks a question so that they can make an intelligent comment, there's somebody here that can answer that
There's-
question.
There's some back and forth, there's option for maybe A, B, C.
But I don't like this focus group listening sessions where we talk to agritourism, tourist home, special event venues, and then special interest groups, and then business representatives, because largely, you can disagree with me, but largely what I've seen in the last 20 years in Rappahannock County is you've got 8 or 10 groups. And the members are all the same people, but one is a chairman of this group and the other is a president of that group. We don't have a large enough group of people in this community for them to have a large group of people in every one of those groups. So it's the same people, whether they're the businesses of Rappahannock, or they're some environmental group, or they're a special group that wants a bike trail. It's all the same people.
Right, I get that, and I think you want to try to engage the community, and I do think you want to hear from those agritourism folks, but it's really to learn and understand. That doesn't mean you're not going to regulate them. And what you learn might help you regulate them in a way that helps them and doesn't hurt the neighbor, or maybe.
Yeah, but I think it's better to hear that to me in the context of a larger public meeting, because I think when you hear it as a breakout session, sometimes, rightfully or not, it'll hold more weight.
Right. And so I think the planning commission should really drive the this kind of scope discussion with the Berkeley group.
Well, good, because you'll be at the meeting on the 15th.
Right.
So when we worked on the comp plan, we met at every fire hall in every district, so
Yeah, taking the meeting
it wasn't unfair to Wakefield District. They have really 2 distinct districts. You have Chester Gap and Wakefield, Flint Hill, so we had 2 in Wakefield, but we had 1 in every other
But Anita
district.
probably went to all the meetings.
Probably, and so did Phil Irwin. I think Phil Irwin made every one of the meetings too.
So that's opportunity, but I do agree, if you want to engage the public, you have to go to where they are.
Well, it's more comfortable.
Yep.
It really is. I mean, even the chairs may not be, but the facility, the gathering is more comfortable.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure I had this, I just want to make sure I got it out.
Okay.
Work has been done, and the Berkeley group is asking me, should we be saving time for you? I'm telling them, save time for us.
Please.
Yes.
Do you need a motion?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think the planning commission will review this. The budget's there. It's really just,
Getting the work moving.
now, if this is over $25,000, then I'll be back at the next meeting to get your approval to
Okay.
execute the award to whatever.
Pay for it.
Yeah, not pay
Thanks.
for it, but start it.
Good, I'm glad we're doing this. All right, board committee reports. Building committee.
We did not meet, and I will take the blame for that, but I'm gonna blame it on Mr. Curry being out of town on vacation.
Yep, that's fine.
Can I ask you a real quick question?
Sure.
Do you guys have an update on the jail progress? Is that?
We're working on the process to both pre-qualify the contractors, because we've got to have a process where when we put it out on the street, you have the ability to take the lowest responsive bidder and work with that individual. And if we don't have some criteria set up in advance, then you're going to wind up with a lot of work that we've had over the
The
years.
volunteer members of the committee, mainly Mr. Waters, has done his job. It's stuck in my office.
We just got to finalize it, I guess.
Okay.
So, we'll try and have a meeting here shortly.
Thought about before we have another meeting and then I haven't done anything that I would have more information to share after the last meeting. So I was wondering if we should do some sort of walking tour or give people the option to come and actually tour the grounds from where you guys are looking to do it. Should we put up a board with what the 2 options were that we're staring at the other night? Just so people can see it and feel it a little bit more than what's on the screen.
Yeah, we're going to have to do something to help move that process along, so, maybe we can put some kind of string lines up on the ground or a general description. Obviously, we don't want to put paint up. Gotta stay
Hard to
there.
convey the 3D.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, we're gonna have to do something to try and move that along, because we're really at a crossroads. We need to know what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it, and if it's this or that, and then the little building plays into at least one of those scenarios.
The other thing that occurred to me after our discussion was that we haven't really done a lot of site work to see how the building will lay on the land. And if the building can lay on the land, maybe would be a better way to look at it. So there may be a will to do some site work to make sure that the building that we set our hearts on is compatible with the location.
So if the general location of over there makes sense, then it might be time to do some investigative borings to find bedrock, and we can build anything. I mean,
Yeah.
bedrock
But
or not.
if we have a smaller
but
site, we might want
cost
to build
could
a
be
smaller
cost.
building.
Yeah.
It may be a perfect place for a quarry. We don't know that.
Which can turn into a swimming pool, I hear.
Right.
All right, Recreational Facilities Authority.
So we've been clipping along. Last year we had a great year. We have finally gotten the fence built, which looks great. Thank you, Mr. Curry, for organizing that. We have now 2 subcommittees. There's a lot of excitement about the playground and what we can do to rehab it and rehabilitate that situation. And a lot of folks have reached out to me over that, which has just been amazing. Folks that were involved in building the original pirate ship, and so there's just so much community support to rehab and think about it and to kind of move forward. So anyway, there's 2 subcommittees, which is 3 subcommittees, which is the playground committee, the court sports surfaces, what's it called?
Invasive species
Oh,
management.
Yeah, invasive species management, sorry. So we've kind of just gotten real busy with, developing different work streams to get these things done. And our chair, who's been fantastic, has forwarded along a new request, budget request. There's a lot of deferred maintenance that needs to be dealt with, and Mr. George Gardner has been instrumental in helping us to identify certain things that can really help us to be more efficient in the future. Everybody's just really excited, and I'm really glad to see that fence up.
And I just want to say, Mr. Gardner, who's one of my constituents, he really prepared some awesome analysis, particularly on the deferred maintenance front. So I think that there's a lot of work being done, and folks like Mr. Gardner really infused life into the park board, which is really great.
Absolutely. Thank you, George.
Bonnie, have we received the Forest Sustainability Fund payment yet?
We've received half of it, not the second half yet.
Okay.
And what's the total amount? That was
$100,000.
No. Forest Sustainability was 20-something.
23.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking about a different. Yes, 20-something.
Yeah.
okay.
That was the other LATC.
Yes, LATCF.
Right.
So one of the big things that the park has got to, we've identified that we need to deal with probably sooner than later is the ash trees that are all scattered in the trails. And so we've identified some that need to come down quicker than others, but they all need to come down, and so we need to get some quotes, and we need to deal with that. When we have to make a decision about the $23,000 from this grant, I'm going to put my plug in, as I've been doing that. The park would love to receive it for deferred maintenance purposes, one of which is the removal of these dead ash trees for safety reasons.
Yeah.
And it is restricted for outdoor recreation or education.
Yeah.
We had a couple of the appointees on that board that were appointed because of their fundraising experience and abilities. So are you working on that too?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I think they're focused on playgrounds, though.
Yeah, so to Mr. Fraser's point, we're going to have a capital campaign that none of us expect the Board of Supervisors to fund where the park would like to go. We get some supplemental money from us as we have done. Last year we got $14,000. We're asking for a little bit more, not a whole lot more, but knowing that moving forward we need to be fundraising, grant writing, things of that nature to get court sports surfaces, as was done in the past, paid for, the playground, all that kind of stuff. There's grants. Mr. George Gardner has been instrumental in that. And so that campaign hasn't truly kicked off, but it will be a real undertaking. And it will be, we're all really excited about it because I think that it will afford the park an opportunity to service some needs of the county that, well, they've been there, but it would just be good to get them done. So, yeah, to your point, yeah, we've definitely identified that. Said, hey, we need to do this. So.
And you've got a meeting coming up, right? I think I put it
Yes,
on my
this week,
calendar.
right?
Nice.
I'm gonna try to,
There's a meeting on the 8th, I think, for court
Yeah.
sports, and then
Yeah.
invasive and the full board on the 9th.
I'm gonna try to make the ninth.
So, been
Library.
doing a lot of work.
Public Safety Committee, we didn't meet after December.
Mr. Pulser did send dates out for the year, if you could check your schedule.
Okay, yep, I think I'm good with them. Rules Committee,
We meet generally in tandem with the building committee, and we did not meet.
okay.
We're blaming that on me and Mr. Curry.
Planning Commission,
We met and you saw the concerns on the agenda that were referred back to the board. As I said, we did move along the sign ordinance and we'll revisit that at the next meeting. We had a couple of tourist home applications, one of which was recommended for denial to the BZA. That is ongoing. And then the other, the applicant did not show up and we had questions that required her presence, so.
I will say that I staffed the BZA meeting for Ms. Summers, and you probably read the Harmony Manor B&B was denied unanimously. I think that took all the air out of the room. I don't remember what else they considered.
I have a question about that, Mr. Curry. When we heard, and I can't remember if it was here or at the Planning Commission recently, about the disc golf course out there at Jenkins Mountain, Mr. Hendrickson had said that that was allowed because when his children were younger, Mr. McCarthy gave him approval to put up some baskets. It must have been at the Planning Commission because you're making faces, so you clearly haven't heard this
No.
before. So,
He didn't own the property then, did he?
well,
No.
I mean, he said that Mr. McCarthy gave him approval, so it must have been in John McCarthy's time.
So Mr.
To-
Fort, maybe?
I don't know, Mr. Fort would be giving
We-
approval for
We
Mr.
haven't formally opined on whether that is an acceptable use or not.
Hendrickson didn't own the property
You said
when John
Mr. Ford
McCarthy.
owned that property.
Mr. Ford owned the property before, and he was at the BZA meeting, interestingly.
And is it an acceptable use?
We haven't formally opined whether it's an acceptable use.
Okay, we have not.
We have not
Okay.
made that
Questions been
determination.
raised for sure.
I just, I mean, to me, when I extrapolate that situation, and I don't know if they have it in writing or if it was a verbal, hey, go out and like you're tossing the ball around with the kids kind of idea. And that was sort of course you can do that at your house, but can you craft an 18-hole professional disc golf course?
Yeah,
I thought,
vested uses is complicated. I don't think it would extend to an extrapolation of 1 or 2 goals to 18 and multiple.
and I thought that the disc golf course was, I thought that the property owner was claiming that it was an acceptable agritourism activity.
That'd be the customary and incidental to the ag use.
Right, but it is its own entity. It is Jenkins Mountain Disc Golf.
But they
and-
don't charge money for it.
Well, but there is, I mean, that would be like me saying,
Yeah.
my kid plays baseball, we toss a ball around in the yard. I build a giant
Field of dreams.
field of dreams at my house.
Yeah.
And then, okay, maybe I'm not exactly charging money for it. But
Depends how many cars
does
come.
that work? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm on 522.
It can be complicated. And, Art and I and Michelle have talked about it a little bit. We just know, as with all the zoning matters, if we take action, ultimately we need to defend it in court.
Yeah.
Because we know that's where we could end up.
Okay,
And
well, that maybe is a detail that you hadn't heard before, and I've just been wondering, so thank you for reminding me to ask about it.
Yeah, that's surprising because Yeah, just thinking, they haven't owned that property for, well, anyway, it doesn't.
Yeah,
Yep.
LLC, who knows?
But I'd ask the question whether it's a golf course.
And I mean, our children are always our children, so maybe I took it to mean like when they were young, but it was actually when they were a little older.
My 50-year-old child.
Ask me how I know.
All right, fire levy board.
So, yeah, we had a meeting on the second. Mr. Curry brought up some things we spoke about, the referrals from the board. We also discussed the language that came back from the chiefs regarding community outreach, expenses, reconciliation for expenses for community outreach, education, recruitment and retention, and travel. We identified some language in the travel portion that Mr. Glennie is going to work on to make sure that those costs don't, that they're reasonable, which is a good thing. And it was a little broad, but he's going to crunch that. And then the 22nd, when we meet, back again, we'll reconsider that language to add it to the current fire levy guideline, which would hopefully
Recommend
to here. Yeah, we would finalize that to then recommend to here so that we could look at it, so we could augment those opportunities really for the fire companies and rescue.
I believe this half-year bills are due today, by the end of today, to me, and so as of this morning, I had all but two, so I imagine the other two have trickled into email during today.
And just for the board's awareness, we had an organizational meeting and Chair Stenner is still the chair, Mr. Brady is still the vice chair, Ms. Nick's the treasurer, and Janie is now, she's gonna be our secretary. So thank you to all of them.
She's a professional secretary now.
Who's the treasurer?
Ms. Nick.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, going into treasurer's reports.
I don't think there's really anything that stands out.
It looked to me on the cash flow graph, I guess, and the food and lodging information that we're getting, that we're starting to level out.
Oh, definitely, if you look at the sales tax data, we'll get quarterly data again for meals and lodging coming up.
Yep.
But if you look at the sales tax data, you can see both January and December, we didn't meet the peaks from the year ago.
Yep.
Now, in the same breath, you can see what those peaks have been doing.
Yep.
So,
Do they still meet our previous budget expectations?
yes, and each time Bounty sends that out, I think she tells you, we're still on track for the 993, I think it is, for the revenue. The 12-month rolling total was just around $1 million still, I think. So.
Is the 993 sales tax only, or sales
Yes.
tax and meals?
Sales tax only.
Okay. It's amazing.
Potential for, I haven't checked the bills, I think the sales tax on the groceries and other goods bill, did that die?
I think I really did that.
Yeah. There was a potential for the other 1% to go away, be backfilled by the state, and then distributed through who knows what means back to the counties. And it's possible that we would make out better because our typical proportion of our sales tax that is groceries is probably less than normal. Because we don't have a
For sure, yeah, we don't have a big store.
Yeah. So, but I think that died.
Anything else in that building zone?
Not unless Bonnie has something to say about the reports.
It was passed by indefinitely in the Finance and Appropriations Committee.
Wonderful.
They'll keep looking at that without a doubt.
VDOT monthly report. I didn't know if there was anything there we needed to.
Just the paving schedule is attached. If you haven't taken a look at that, please take a look at it. And they made a nice little map for us that shows the green is where actual asphalt is happening. So a large section of 211 in the middle of the county. I believe also they're using some safety funds to do some limited trench widening of that section during that project. So that means they just go along the edge of the asphalt and they dig it down and put more asphalt in. So you have a little bit wider shoulder, all within the right of way. The yellow is surface treated, so you already have a chip seal type thing, and they'll do more of that. So
Does the fact, I mean, now I'm probably gonna jinx our winter, but the fact that the VDOT's expended almost no snow removal money, does it any of that budget surplus come back to localities?
Doubt it. No. Oh, definitely not to localities. Now, whether
That's a
they
different
could
fund.
allocate to other projects, they may have a greater ability to do some grading projects or something like that, but
But they won't do that until April. I mean, historically, we've had a couple of deep snows in March. March 17th, we had a 93 was what they always refer to as the unnamed storm, was 2 foot with blowing drifts. 729 was closed.
Wow.
Completely closed bank to bank. They were using loaders. So, and then there was another, I think, March, it was on the ground on the 17th, but I think it was actually
you get those nor'easters in
a
the
day or two
spring.
before that it hit. It was about 2 feet. So they won't take any of the snow
But,
removal
you know,
money.
a bunch of salt in the building and less fuel used and less overtime doesn't really make asphalt.
Yeah.
The other VDOT question, when they went ahead and made the decision to do I guess it was through board approval, the turn lane at Holly Springs.
You used your secondary road funds for that?
Yeah, I remember when Mr. Nesbitt talked about ballpark costs, it was pretty shocking, and I'd asked the question if they track actual costs, and I'd just be curious, I don't know when we're gonna hear from him next, but I'd be interested to know what they budgeted for that single turn lane and what was actually spent.
Would be interesting. It'll be shocking.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's like a tangible VDOT project. It would just be just for reference purposes.
The first, and on the same note, this first section of Kaiser Run Road, which was regraded and the hard surface, was much more expensive than originally planned.
Okay.
So all that floats into this secondary plan, that 6-year plan, and so it means other projects kind of move around in time as the money gets used up. We'll hear about that again this spring. The board had one section of Turkey Ridge last year to the tail end. So we've got a meeting with VDOT coming up in the next week or two to kick that process off.
So I just want to ask one question. Is it possible that if they don't do a lot of snow stuff, that it could be that in the early summer, there might be opportunity to do some more spreading of gravel and grading?
Definitely.
Okay.
I don't think they're tied together.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
they're
talking,
not-
it's overtime,
Yeah, I did
labor versus stone. I mean, it's just,
They don't do their final payouts on snow removal until because they've got mob and demob money, and that, they take care of that like mid-April, so I don't even think they start generating those figures until probably the 1st of May. So I don't know myself, but it would be interesting to see if we could
well,
get some of
whenever the
that.
next quarterly update is,
So,
which is
Mr.
usually when I
Nesbitt,
remember to put it on the agenda. We'll ask him.
give him a heads up, you might need to do some figuring.
He'll definitely be here May for the public hearing. So,
All right, moving into matters presented by the board. Mr. Frazier.
None at this time come to mind.
Okay. Ms. Smith?
No, thank you.
Mr. Whitson?
Nothing.
Mr. Carney?
Thank
The only thing I had was, I know some of us have been talking to people in the county about CPR training and AED purchases and that kind of public safety type things, and I don't know, supposedly there's a grant out there for AEDs.
I know Mr. Polster's has reached out to the chiefs to gauge their interest in hosting CPR training at their stations. I saw a bunch of back and forth emails that seemed interest. The chiefs already have a schedule through the year for their own members to get training, so I think they're talking about adding extra, opening it up if they're not full. We've had some general conversations about the grant side of things. We did pursue grants with PATH for forward deployed AEDs at businesses. PATH didn't see that aligned with their mission. So we're looking at other options.
Maybe we could put that on the agenda for next month, and I'll dig around a little bit, and it'd be good to talk to Mr. Polster about what he's found out in terms of grant funding, because I know that Paul and Cookie Baldwin, who own Quickie Mart and Baldwin's, one of their managers has expressed a while ago an interest in AED there given that.
Probably a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of got the idea going in my head, and then more recent events have got me thinking about it. And I guess in a dream scenario, I think it would be really awesome if every church and every significant business had an AED, just to fill the gap where response times maybe can't be what they need to be for saving someone in a cardiac event.
I was
That might-
talking to,
Oh, sorry, that might be a function of funding and just education.
Yep.
Many of these organizations may be willing
Yeah.
to buy something, they just had confidence to know what they need to do and what the
Yeah.
obligations were.
The church I worked for down in Georgia, we put them in the parish hall and in the offices. It
Yeah.
wasn't, it wasn't cost prohibitive.
somebody told me that Madison did something with their churches and stuff, so I just would like us to
Madison
research.
Rescue Squad used their money that they had when they disbanded to buy AEDs for every imaginable place.
There is a tail with these things, there's annual maintenance,
Right.
upkeep, so you can't just stick them out there and forget about them. Someone's
Right.
gotta start paying attention and,
Watch the battery.
Yep.
watch
What
batteries.
are the
and-
conditions on how they're used and by whom?
Citizen deployed, and so, very simple pictograph directions.
And they talk.
Yeah,
Got it.
it's really pretty impressive.
Yeah, and on the maintenance side, because there are AEDs deployed.
There's one downstairs, the bottom of the stairs.
Yeah, so maybe it would be a role of our local government to track those AEDs once they're deployed, or the ones that are deployed,
Bless you.
and then keep track of maintenance and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I agree, you hate to see some dusty one sit in a corner and then someone needs to use it. So
Then the battery be dead.
someone needs to take responsibility for a system, and if we can bolster the number of them through grant money, that'd be awesome. So,
The only other thing I had was welcoming Mark Kirwan, the new owner of 659 Zachary Taylor. That is the Dark Horse Irish Pub. Mark and his, they're not married, but his very close girlfriend, have a farm in Rixieville that's about 62 acres, and they basically adopt rescue animals. When the police find an animal that's not being treated well, they call him. So he's got sheep and llamas and horses and cattle and a little bit of everything. But I think that speaks volumes about his personality, and he is already engaging with the hunts, and he's interested in the fodder stack and really following in the footsteps that the tavern laid. And I'm very happy about that, because I think he will have some exciting ways to boost some extra dollars in different areas. That'll be
Right.
great. So please stop in and say hello to him. You can't miss him. He's extremely tall and very Irish, and can text in Gaelic, which always throws me off when I get back.
wow,
Yeah.
that's exciting.
All right.
More exciting for you.
It
that,
is.
you have a little bit extra time on your hands.
Yes.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Yes, thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.